Chapter 90 began in the hospital where Jinwoo and his mother were. The head doctor was taken aback by the news brought by his colleague. Someone had awoken from eternal slumber. The colleague called it an unprecedented event. The doctor's colleague further explained that the patient's guardian was demanding the immediate discharge of the patient. The head doctor firmly replied, "Absolutely not." He explained that the patient's condition was still unstable, as she had been bedridden for 4 years and probably couldn't walk. However, the colleague replied that all the tests had returned to normal, and the patient was completely healthy, capable of walking on her own. The head doctor was puzzled. How could the patient's body be perfectly fine after being immobile for 4 years? The colleague speculated that it might be due to the life-supporting machine. Despite this, the head doctor maintained that even if she seemed fine, the patient couldn't be discharged yet, and that the medical community needed to be informed. The colleague, however, explained that he had tried reasoning with the guardian but found that he was no ordinary person. He whispered to the head doctor, asking if he had heard of Sung-Jinwoo, who had recently become the country's 10th S-rank hunter. Upon hearing this, the head doctor broke into a cold sweat, quickly turned around, and changed his stance, now saying, "A hospital shouldn't keep a perfectly healthy patient from going home. It's only right to discharge her immediately." The scene shifted to Jinwoo's mother's room, where his sister, Jeju, had arrived. When their mother saw her, she spoke with surprise, commenting on how much Jeju had grown. Jeju, overwhelmed with emotion, could only say, "Mom," as she hugged her tightly. As Jinwoo watched this, he reflected on how all his hard work had finally paid off, and it felt like a reward for all the struggles he had endured. However, he also felt nervous, knowing that, as a hunter, he had already crossed the bridge of no return. The scene shifted to the outside of the hospital, where Jinwoo sat checking his phone. He had not been able to check it for a while, due to his time spent in the castle. Jinwoo noticed many missed calls but figured that if it was urgent, they would call again soon. He also read a news article and was surprised to see Kaisel mentioned. He wondered why reporters were writing about his shadow. The article reported sightings of a beast flying over Seoul, and there was no evidence of a dungeon break. The article raised concerns about the safety of citizens if the Hunters Association failed to act. Just then, Jinwoo received a call from Chairman Go. Surprised, Jinwoo asked if something had happened. Chairman Go confirmed that Jinwoo probably knew by now, prompting Jinwoo to ask what he was referring to. Chairman Go asked if Jinwoo had been watching the news. Jinwoo, assuming it was about Kaisel, realized how quickly the news had spread. He apologized and said he would be more careful moving forward. Chairman Go was confused and asked, "Pardon?" Jinwoo realized that perhaps Chairman Go wasn't referring to Kaisel after all, so he asked what exactly Chairman Go meant, explaining that he had been off the grid and had no access to his phone. Chairman Go then realized Jinwoo hadn't heard the news yet and offered to come to him in person to explain. However, Jinwoo insisted on going to him instead. The scene changed to the Korean Hunter Association office, where Jinwoo had arrived and was now speaking with Chairman Go. Chairman Go informed him that an operation was set to launch in 4 days. They were going to Jeju Island to exterminate ants, and to succeed, they needed his help. He explained that the entire nation of South Korea was relying on the reclamation of Jeju Island, and he was asking for his assistance. Jinwoo thought to himself that under normal circumstances, he would never turn down an opportunity like this. There were bound to be high-level beasts there, and it would be a great chance to level up. But then, he remembered his mother, who had just recovered. He couldn't bring himself to make a decision yet. Before Jinwoo could respond, he felt a strong mana wave. Chairman Go, noticing his reaction, asked if something was wrong. Jinwoo answered that it seemed like some hunters were fighting nearby. Chairman Go smiled and complimented Jinwoo for his keen senses, noting that he could feel it even from such a distance. He added that it was likely S-rank hunters warming up in the gym, preparing for the upcoming raid in 4 days. This included the Japanese hunters, including Ryuji. When Jinwoo heard this, he stopped and asked again if Chairman Go was referring to the well-known S-rank hunter, Ryuji. Chairman Go confirmed it, saying, "Yes, it's Ryuji, Japan's greatest hunter, and his name is probably known to everyone, even non-hunters." Chairman Go then asked if Jinwoo wanted to visit the gym. The scene shifted to the gym, where Yoon-ho was sparring with another hunter. Yoon-ho attempted to strike his opponent, but was stopped when the opponent gripped his hand, creating a big impact. The hunter then shoved Yoon-ho's shoulder and kicked his foot, pushing him to the ground. The opponent shouted, calling Yoon-ho's strength disappointing. Yoon-ho simply smiled and replied, "No coach ma." The two continued sparring, creating loud impacts with each move. Jinwoo and Chairman Go had finally arrived at the gym. Chairman Go remarked that it was rare to see so many S-rank hunters gathered in one place. He also speculated that the mana waves Jinwoo had felt earlier likely originated from here. Jinwoo noticed that Yoon-ho seemed to be struggling against his opponent. Suddenly, a voice responded, confirming this and adding that if Yoon-ho were to use his full strength, his opponent wouldn't be able to keep up. It was Choi Jong-in, who had entered the gym and greeted Jinwoo, saying, "It's been a while, Mr. Sung." He then introduced the hunter who was sparring with Yoon-ho, Ma Dongwook, an S-rank hunter and the guildmaster of Fame Guild, one of the 5 major guilds in South Korea, and considered the 4th strongest guild in the country. Jinwoo, curious, asked why Yoon-ho was holding back against Ma, especially since he seemed to be in good form. Jong-in explained that there was an audience watching, and fighting at full capacity in such a situation would put Yoon-ho in an awkward position, as he would transform into a monster whenever he fought seriously. Jinwoo realized that the rumors about Yoon-ho's transformation were true. Jong-in then pointed to the other gathered individuals, identifying them as Japanese S-rank hunters. He introduced them one by one. Izawa Ippei, Ishida Mari, Tanaka Kenzo, Hoshino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, Tawada Kanan, Fujishima Tatsumi, Shimizu Akari, and finally, Goto Ryuji. Chapter 91 began with Jinwoo wondering if the man standing at a distance was Goto Ryuji, the S-rank hunter from Japan. On the other side, Akari spoke up and asked Hanakawa about the man standing there, to which Hanakawa replied, "His name is Sung-Jinwoo, a hunter who recently became an S-rank." Goto Ryuji noticed Jinwoo as well and began to wonder if he might be an assassin-type hunter. However, if he were, his presence wouldn't be so easily hidden, he added. So, Ryuji concluded that Jinwoo must be an exceptional assassin. Hanakawa overheard and asked, "Pardon?" She then clarified that Jinwoo was actually a mage hunter. Ryuji was surprised and said, "Impossible," but Hanakawa insisted, "It's officially confirmed that he's a mage type." Lim Taegyu also noticed Jinwoo and asked Cha Haein if he was the one responsible for ruining Min Sung's debut. Haein turned her gaze to Jinwoo and thought to herself that maybe he was the reason the atmosphere felt different all of a sudden. Meanwhile, Kei and Ishida, 2 other Japanese S-rank hunters, were conversing. Ishida pointed out Jinwoo to Kei and explained that he was Korea's 10th S-rank hunter. Kei, however, didn't seem interested in the conversation, saying, "Don't talk to me about him. I feel like I'm going to throw up with all these S-rank hunters gathered here." Kei also noticed that Haein resembled him in a way, particularly because of her sensitive nose, which she only seemed to cover with a handkerchief. This made Kei think that Haein was a few tiers below him. He also considered starting a conversation, but then feared she might think he was hitting on her. He regretted not learning some Korean beforehand. The scene shifted, and the fight between Yoon-ho and Dongwook was still ongoing. While watching the match, Hanakawa asked Goto Ryuji if these hunters were considered South Korea's strongest, adding that they were mediocre at best. Ryuji asked, "You think so?" Hanakawa explained that after observing his raids from the sidelines for some time, she was no longer impressed by the S-ranks. Ryuji disagreed, saying there was one notable hunter among them, Cha Haein. He thought that she, along with Chairman Go, would give our best hunters a run for their money. At that moment, another hunter approached Hanakawa and addressed her as Ms. Interpreter, asking if she truly believed that South Korea's S-rank hunters were mediocre, and said that it seemed Hanakawa think they didn't understand what she was saying. The hunter also said that he had studied Japanese in high school, making it his second language. His companion, who called him boss, then cheered him on, saying, "Go get him." Hanakawa was curious about who the man was, and Yoon-tae proudly introduced him as Park Jong-soo, an A-rank hunter and the guild master of the Knights Guild. Hanakawa admitted she hadn't heard of him before, prompting Yoon-tae to grow irritated. Yoon-tae said that Mr. Park was an A-rank, not an S-rank, and that maybe that was the reason she didn't know him. He also explained that their guild was one of the 5 major guilds in South Korea, with the most A-rank hunters. Jong-soo, however, tapped Yoon-tae to remind him to stop boasting. Hanakawa asked if they would participate in the Jeju Island raid, since, to her knowledge, only S-rank hunters were allowed. Ryuji chimed in, asking what Hanakawa meant by that. Yoon-tae immediately jumped to Mr. Park's defense, explaining that he was part of the defense team in charge of blocking access to the island. Hanakawa replied, good to hear because it wouldn't be wise to assign any important task to an A-rank hunter. This irritated Yoon-tae even more, but then Ryuji spoke to Hanakawa, telling her that if she was being discourteous, she needed to stop immediately. Jong-soo, not backing down, told her to knock it off, adding that Hanakawa was just an interpreter tagging along and didn't know anything. Now irritated, Hanakawa challenged Jong-soo, asking if he wanted to test her. She then introduced herself as an A-rank hunter and said, "Don't tell me you can't take on a mere interpreter who's just tagging along." She then removed her suit and revealing a powerful aura. Jong-soo retorted, "For Christ's sake, enough with the dissing." He was about to walk away when Hanakawa suddenly asked if he was a non-combatant hunter, implying that maybe this is the reason why he is refusing to fight. This irritated Jong-soo further. Jinwoo, who had been observing the situation, thought it looked like a potential fight was about to break out between 2 A-rank hunters, one from Japan and one from South Korea. Jong-in, watching beside Jinwoo, remarked, "Looks like things are about to get interesting." Jong-soo then accepted the fight but proposed that they set rules for the match. The first person to grab the opponent's wrist would win, and the first to have their wrist caught would lose. Hanakawa, realizing that even if she threw punches, the fight would end once her wrist was grabbed, then said that it looks like they would play mind games with each other. She asked Jong-soo if he was ready, noticing him standing calmly at a distance with one hand in his pocket, exuding a fierce aura. Then Jong-soo said that she didn't have to worry because he would not take his hand out, unless it was to grab her wrist. Hanakawa thought to herself that Jong-soo must be confident in his speed. She then said, "All right, let's begin." Without hesitation, Hanakawa charged at Jong-soo and unleashed a flurry of rapid attacks, all of which Jong-soo easily dodged. On Hanakawa's mind, she was determined to wipe the smug look off Jong-soo's face. But with a swift kick attack, Jong-soo managed to knock Hanakawa's hand away, stopping her onslaught. Jong-soo commented, "For the record, I didn't hit you. It was just a little shove. Do you understand?" Hanakawa, trying to hide her frustration, apologized sarcastically, "Sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding your accent." She also added that Jong-soo was just trying to look cool in his ripped pants. Suddenly, Hanakawa rushed at Jong-soo, thinking this was her chance. But before her attack could land, Jong-soo grabbed her wrist and said, "Too slow, Ms. Interpreter." Hanakawa was taken aback, not understanding how it happened. As Jong-soo held her wrist, he noticed Hanakawa trembling and mockingly repeated her earlier words. "You're the type of hunter who hides behind tanks, huh? Seems like you've got no one-on-one experience." He continued, "In South Korea, we often run into troublemakers, and sometimes we have to fight our own kind. If things get worse, we might even have to kill them. And unlike magic beasts, humans don't move so simply. You're dead if you can't predict your opponent's next move. If I had a sword, I would have sliced your throat, not your wrist," he added. Hanakawa then pulled away her hand from Jong-soo's grip as she looked irritated. Ryuji, breaking the tension, thanked them for the exciting match. He then turned to Hanakawa, instructing her to relay his proposal to everyone. Ryuji said that in the interest of fostering trust between the two countries, proposed that S-rank hunters spar using the same rules as the fight between Jong-soo and Hanakawa. Chairman Go walked in and agreed and said it sounds good. However, mage type and non-combatant hunters should be excluded, since it would be difficult to determine who wins. Yoon-ho then also suggested additional rules. If a hunter grabbed the opponent's wrist, back, or knocked them down, that would be an automatic win. He added also that multiple hunters must compete against each other instead of having one-on-one matches. He asked then if everyone agreed, and after Hanakawa translated his words to Ryuji, Ryuji then considered the new rules. He realized that knocking one person out could turn the tide of the fight, and assassin-type hunters would have a significant advantage. Despite this, he agreed, saying, "All right, sounds good." The hunters representing South Korea would be S-rank hunters Yoon-ho, Ma Dong-wook, Cha Hae-in, and Lim Tae-gyu. The Japanese side would feature S-rank hunters Tanaka Kenzo, Hoshino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, and Tawada Kane. The chapter begins with Jin-woo noticing that Goto Ryuji isn't participating in the sparring between the Japanese and South Korean hunters. Jin-woo thought that he might just want to see how strong the South Korean hunters are. He also realized that a match between S-rank hunters is a rare sight and was glad he came to witness it. Kenzo, the Japanese hunter, believed he had a good read on Dong-wook and Yoon-ho from their earlier battle, but he had a feeling that Yoon-ho might be hiding something. Tawada, on the other hand, thought that because it was a 4-on-4 match, her opponent would likely be the girl on the other team, Hae-in. Meanwhile, Tae-gyu hoped that the Japan hunters would go easy on them. Dong-wook suddenly became excited and urged the battle to begin, and it was clearly evident that the South Korean team was ready. On the other side, Kenzo smiled, noticing Dong-wook's ability to grow larger, preferring a battle of strength. He said, "Nice, very nice. I like that you keep it simple," as he unleashed a powerful aura. Both hunters charged at each other, throwing punches that collided with a loud impact. At the same time, they both shouted, "Let's see who's stronger." Meanwhile, Minoru charged toward Tae-gyu, who was startled by his speed. Tae-gyu realized that Minoru's speed was his strong suit, and that close-quarter combat would put him at a disadvantage. However, he was confident that creating distance was his specialty, and he released a magic arrow toward his opponent. He said, "Of course, creating distance isn't just my specialty. So is attacking from a distance." Minoru dodged the arrow but was shocked to see that it was also aimed at his teammates. Atsushi realized this and said, "So he's a ranger." The Japanese hunters then realized that the South Korean hunters weren't planning on sticking to a one-on-one battle. Kenzo acknowledged that their only option was for Minoru to quickly take down Tae-gyu. Chairman Go, watching from the sidelines, noted that the facility was fortified with essence stones of the highest quality, and an average hunter could only leave a dent in the walls. But what he saw now was that it had been completely wrecked by them in mere seconds. He thought it was quite regrettable that they only sent young hunters to the battlefield. The scene shifted to Yoon-ho, who was thinking that their opponents were some of the most powerful S-ranks in the world. He realized they needed to prepare not only to grab their wrists, but also to break them if necessary. His opponent, Atsushi, thought Yoon-ho was wasting his energy. He also planned not to target the wrist or the back, nor follow any silly rules. He believed that the survival of the fittest was the only thing that mattered. He quickly moved behind Yoon-ho, ready to strike. But just as the strike was about to land, he dashed away. Yoon-ho was surprised and wondered why Atsushi had hesitated. He began to question if Atsushi was afraid. Atsushi, frustrated with himself, wondered if he was really cut out to be a hunter. On the other side, Yoon-ho thought about his opponent, wondering whether he had great judgment or was just a coward. He also questioned if his previous belief that a desire for combat was necessary to be a hunter was wrong. Yoon-ho then realized that Ryuji likely wanted the S-rank hunters to fight each other to test Atsushi's strength, to see if he was ready to fight the ants. In light of this realization that they were only being used for testing, he decided to give them a little taste of his true power. As his form began to change, Atsushi noticed the transformation and became frightened, wanting to leave. Suddenly, Yoon-ho leaped toward him, commenting that Atsushi was a coward and how it was a pity that he was considered one of the top ranks out there, while unleashing an attack that Atsushi barely avoided. Meanwhile, Jong-soo watched the battle and remarked that it was nothing but monsters fighting, and that his match seemed like child's play in comparison. Yoon-tae disagreed, saying that it was nonsense to think like that because he was cool in his earlier fight. Suddenly, a loud impact echoed through the air. Dong-wook had been defeated by Kenzo, who remarked, "Looks like I'm the stronger one between the two of us." Dong-wook, lying on the ground, couldn't believe he had been drilled into it, saying that this was the first time something like this had ever happened to him. The scene shifted to the fight between Taegyu and Minoru, where it was clear that Minoru already had the upper hand, as Taegyu was sent crashing into the wall. Minoru declared himself the winner. Yoon-ho then asked his opponents if he would be their next target, questioning whether they thought he would be an easier target than Haein. He simply replied, "Well, you've underestimated me." On the other side, Tawada faced off against Haein, who was struggling to land a hit. She had initially thought that Haein was all about speed, but quickly realized she was wrong, as she couldn't read the pattern of her movements. As Haein unleashed a powerful aura, Tawada remembered her nickname, the Dancer, given to her for the way she effortlessly killed beasts, almost like dancing. However, the nickname had been banned because Haein found it embarrassing. Haein launched numerous attacks at Tawada, striking using her hands. Tawada tried to retaliate but was easily stopped when Haein broke her attack with a slash, knocking off her cap in the process. Haein quickly dashed behind her, touching her back and ending the battle. Afterward, after defeating Tawada, Haein thought to herself that she needed to hurry and help Yoon-ho. In the distance, Atsushi appeared behind Haein, ready to strike. He thought that with two of his teammates focusing on Yoon-ho, he could concentrate on taking down Haein. However, Haein unleashed a flurry of attacks using her hands, hitting Atsushi directly in the face. The Japanese hunters were stunned, with Fujishima comparing her attack to a Gatling gun. Meanwhile, Ishida wondered how many times she had punched just now, estimating that it was either 10 or maybe 14 times. They couldn't believe how quickly she had hit Atsushi in the blink of an eye. Atsushi, now bloodied and battered, looked different. His teammates could tell he had lost control, and Kei remarked that when Atsushi got angry, he became a completely different person, losing his sense of rational thinking. Ishida added that after his rage subsided, Atsushi wouldn't remember anything. Kei then pointed out that someone like him wouldn't be suitable for a strike squad, as he couldn't even work with a team to clear an A-rank gate, despite being capable of clearing a B-rank gate by himself. Haein, meanwhile, was shocked by the power of her own attack, realizing it had been an instinctive response. Goto Ryuji, observing from a distance, noted that if Atsushi attacked one of the South Korean hunters, they would have to stop him immediately. However, he decided to let him continue for now, as this was just a test. Hanakawa wondered if this was the best time to intervene, realizing they couldn't afford to compensate for the damage Atsushi would cause. As the battle raged on, Haein narrowly dodged an attack, only to find that her opponent seemed like a completely different person now, almost as if in a rage mode. In the blink of an eye, he was behind her. Haein was caught off guard by his speed. Just as she was about to be struck, a massive explosion occurred, creating a powerful shockwave. Atsushi, witnessing this, was shocked to see none other than Sung-Jinwoo intervene in the fight. Jinwoo apologized for intervening, explaining that he decided to stop them as they had clearly gotten carried away with their sparring session. He held Atsushi's foot with one hand and had his other hand on Haein's back, much to her surprise. Atsushi, still defiant, called Jinwoo a bastard and, in a fit of rage, tried to strike him. However, Jinwoo easily avoided the attack and reversed the situation, slamming Atsushi into the floor. Goto Ryuji, watching from a distance, noticed Jinwoo's movements and was impressed. He asked Hanakawa again if Sung-Jinwoo was truly a mage hunter. Hanakawa confirmed it, saying it was at least true according to the official statement that had been released. Ryuji then said that the easiest way to confirm it was to check for himself. While Jinwoo held Atsushi's hand and pinned him to the ground, he suggested to Haein that they call the sparring match a loss for the South Korean team, which she agreed to. It was clear that Yoon-ho had already been defeated and was now being held by Kinzo. Yoon-ho meanwhile realized that the Japanese hunters were overwhelmingly stronger, and even if he transformed, there wasn't much he could do. Suddenly, Hanakawa approached and called out to Jinwoo, saying that Ryuji wanted to speak with him. Ryuji then confirmed if his name was indeed Jinwoo. Then, suddenly, Ryuji's powerful aura began radiating as he issued a challenge to Jinwoo for a one-on-one fight. He asked Jinwoo what he thought about it. The chapter ended with intense eye contact between the two strong hunters. Chapter 93 began with Jinwoo still staring at Ryuji, sensing from his body language that Ryuji was eager for a fight. Jinwoo didn't need a translation to understand. It was clear that Ryuji wanted to test his skills. Though Jinwoo wasn't entirely sure about Ryuji's intentions, he realized that this was a good opportunity to gauge how strong he had become after the Demon Castle. Meanwhile, Ryuji noticed that Jinwoo was smiling while looking at him. He was taken aback, and a thought crossed his mind. He has the guts to smile in my presence? Hanakawa translated Jinwoo's response, confirming that he was willing to fight, but only under one condition. Jinwoo agreed to the fight, but only if Ryuji used his full strength. Upon hearing this, Ryuji's eyes flashed with a mix of surprise and anger. He muttered to himself, "Is he being serious right now?" Lim Taegyu watched in confusion, unsure of what was going on. Heian, also stunned by the exchange, couldn't believe what she had just heard. Ryuji, on the other hand, thought to himself that it seemed like an interesting challenge. With an S-rank healer in the team, he figured no one would suffer any serious injuries. He then ordered the healer to prepare to assist anyone who got hurt, including him, as he pointed at Jinwoo and said, "He will be needing your help in a few minutes." Dongwook, observing from a distance, asked Heian if Jinwoo was the 10th S-rank hunter everyone had been talking about. He also wondered if Jinwoo would really face Ryuji in a match. "He's got guts," Dongwook muttered. Heian, worried about Jinwoo, wondered if he would be alright facing Ryuji. But then she recalled that Jinwoo had already fought an A-rank dungeon boss and over 100 high-level orcs. Meanwhile, Yoon-ho asked her if she was okay being around these hunters. Heian replied that she couldn't constantly cover her nose, especially once they get to Jeju Island. She then asked Yoon-ho if he was acquainted with Sung-Jinwoo. Yoon-ho quickly confirmed it. Heian then asked why Yoon-ho wasn't stopping Jinwoo from fighting. Yoon-ho explained that normally he would, considering the opponent was Goto Ryuji. Heian asked, "Then why?" Yoon-ho replied, "For the same reason as you." Heian was taken aback by his response and looked at him. Yoon-ho smiled and added, "Aren't you looking forward to the fight too, Ms. Heian?" Heian was caught off guard by Yoon-ho's words. While in Yoon-ho's mind, he thought that if Jinwoo was capable of leveling up, he might become even stronger. Meanwhile, Jinwoo, ready to begin, said, "Alright, let's get started." Before he could finish his sentence, Ryuji's hand appeared before him, launching a strong, sharp attack that created an explosion. However, Jinwoo dodged it with ease. He thought to himself that Ryuji had attacked as soon as he said they would begin. Ryuji, on the other side, looked at his hand, confused, wondering if he had missed his strike. Ryuji thought to himself that if they were saying Jinwoo was indeed a mage-type hunter, he wasn't buying it. His movements were too agile, and his footsteps were silent. "He might be fooling others, but not me," Ryuji added. He was determined to strip away Jinwoo's disguise and expose what he really was. Jinwoo, sensing that Ryuji was a different caliber of S-rank hunter, but on the other hand, he knows that he could still dodge his attacks. Then Ryuji's attacks came one after another, but Jinwoo easily dodged each one, smiling as he did so. Seeing Jinwoo smile only made Ryuji more furious. Another Japanese hunter, Izawa, asked Kenzo if it was time to stop them, but Kenzo replied that it seemed like Ryuji was taking the fight seriously. Lim Taegyu commented on how terrifying their attacks were, noting that even his eyes could barely track their movements. Dongwook observed that, despite facing one of Japan's strongest hunters, Jinwoo was managing to avoid all of Ryuji's attacks, which was an impressive feat in itself. In Heian's mind, however, Jinwoo wasn't just hanging in there. He was allowing Ryuji to attack over and over. Jong-in, seeing the match, commented that it looked like an exciting fight had unfolded while he was out for a smoke. As Ryuji continued to attack, he wondered if Jinwoo was just lucky as he dodges all his attacks, or if there was something more to him. He realized that unless he went all out, he might not land a hit. Determined, Ryuji decided to go all in and kill Jinwoo. In that moment, Jinwoo's system alerted him to an enemy nearby with murderous intent. Jinwoo noticed a cut on his cheek as Ryuji released another devastating strike. The impact sent shockwaves through the air. Ryuji was taken aback when he found his hand suddenly caught by Jinwoo. Jinwoo thought to himself that if he will keep playing around, he would end up with an urgent quest like Hwang Dong-suk or Kang Tae-shik. Jinwoo then calmly told Ryuji that if he had been a second late, he would have lost an eye. Ryuji, stunned, couldn't understand how Jinwoo was so strong. Worse, he thought that Jinwoo could have grabbed his wrist, but he purposefully grabs his hand instead. Enraged, Ryuji demanded to know if Jinwoo was just toying with him. Jinwoo, unfazed, replied that he had no idea what Ryuji was talking about, but he knew that the fight would end once he held his wrist. He then asked Ryuji, "You don't want to end things here, right?" The two locked eyes, and both released powerful auras, as if they were about to finish each other off. The hunters watching were taken aback by what they were witnessing. As they nearly charged at each other, Yoon-ho and Haein intervened, stopping Jinwoo. On the other side, Hoshino held Ryuji back. Hae created an ice wall between them to forcibly halt the match before things escalated any further. Yoon-ho, now in control, told Jinwoo that the fight had gone too far and that Ryuji was in charge of leading the Japanese in the coming days. Haein added that no one would handle the consequences if something happened to Ryuji. Yoon-ho then instructed Hanakawa to call it a day, as the sparring session had gotten too heated. Hanakawa agreed. Once everything calmed down, Yoon-ho asked Jinwoo if he had overstepped any boundaries. Jinwoo shook his head and smiled, reassuring him that it was fine. Dongwook, impressed, praised Jinwoo for his performance against the mighty Goto Ryuji, noting that he only had a cut on his cheek. He also mentioned that Jinwoo had a great build and that his guild was full of mages but lacked fighters. Dongwook asked Jinwoo if he would consider joining them if he didn't have a guild of his own. From afar, Jong-in overheard and commented that Jinwoo was a mage-type hunter. Dongwook was seen in shock as he heard this. Jinwoo then reflected that he had gotten a bit too excited. He thought to himself that he had now had close encounters with figures like Chairman Go, Choi Jong-in, Cha Haein, Baek Yoon-ho, and now Goto Ryuji. Despite all of them are S ranks, Jinwoo knew that none of them had noticed his soldiers hiding in their shadows, not even Goto Ryuji. Suddenly, Jinwoo called out to Chairman Go, asking if he was asking him to participate in the Jeju Island raid. Chairman Go, taken aback, realized that Jinwoo had made his decision. The chapter ended with Hanakawa, concerned, calling Goto Ryuji's name as she saw the S-rank hunter, clearly terrified and drenched in sweat after the match with Jinwoo. Chapter 94 began at the office of the White Tiger Guild, where Baek Yoon-ho sat, letting out a deep sigh after witnessing Sung-Jinwoo's strength. In his mind, he realized that the idea of a hunter growing stronger was not a mere fantasy. Yoon-ho wondered just how much Jinwoo's worth could be. Yoon-ho also thought that his efforts to recruit Jinwoo had likely been a waste of time and energy, but he knew there were other ways to maintain a relationship with a talented hunter. He decided that it was time to move on to Plan B. Checking his phone, he noticed the official list of hunters participating in the upcoming Search and Destroy mission. To his surprise, Jinwoo's name was not on the list. The scene shifted to the hotel where Goto Ryuji was staying. He was on the phone with Sugimoto Reiji, the Vice Guild Master of the Blade Guild, an S-rank hunter. During their conversation, Ryuji mentioned that it seemed there was a skilled hunter in South Korea. Sugimoto laughed, dismissing it, saying that the hunter couldn't possibly be as strong as him. But Ryuji replied that he is not sure about that. Sugimoto asked Ryuji for the name of this hunter. Ryuji responded, revealing that the hunter's name was Sung-Jinwoo, who had undergone a second awakening and was recently evaluated as an S-rank hunter. Sugimoto found this odd because Jinwoo's name wasn't on the list of participants. Ryuji then questioned what Sugimoto meant, and Sugimoto explained that the South Koreans had already sent their list of hunters, which included Choi Jong-in, Ma Dongwook, Baek Yoon-ho, Cha Haein, Lim Taegyu, and Min Byung-gu. These were the hunters who would make up the South Korean team for the raid on Jeju Island in 4 days. Ryuji found this hard to believe. It was unthinkable that Chairman Go would be crazy to exclude such a strong hunter like Jinwoo from the raid team. Sugimoto assured him that there was no need to worry, as 16 S-rank hunters would be participating, and everything would be fine. Ryuji responded with a nonchalant, "All right," reassuring himself that he had worried for nothing. He then said he would call Sugimoto again once the raid began, and Sugimoto agreed. The scene then shifted to Halasan Bangnok Dam, a crater lake on top of Mount Halasan, or Mount Hala, which means White Deer Lake, where the Ant Queen and her army resided. The Ant Queen had decided that they could no longer stay on the island due to the lack of food. The so-called ant children were eating each other, unable to sustain the kingdom. The queen decreed that they needed stronger soldiers and presented a large egg containing what appeared to be a powerful ant soldier. She ordered that this soldier consume whatever it could and become stronger, destined to lead the kingdom and strike fear into their enemies. The Ant Queen then repeated the words, "Make the enemies who stand in our way tremble in fear, and you must become stronger numerous times," until the soldier began to emerge from the egg. It let out a powerful scream, and an overwhelming aura enveloped the entire ant kingdom. The queen gave the soldier its final command: to consume all there is to consume in order to grow stronger, calling it her child. Next, the scene moved to Jinwoo's apartment, where he had returned with his mother and sister, Jin-ah. Upon entering, they were met with a messy apartment, and Jinwoo realized that it looked as if no one had cleaned while he was away at the demon castle. He playfully pinched his sister's face. His mother then commented it had been 4 years since she last did housework. His mother smiled and suggested they clean together, which Jinwoo agreed to with a smile. As they cleaned, Jinwoo's mother remarked that the house had become run down, filled with grit and grime in hidden places. Jinwoo agreed, acknowledging that they had lived there since his childhood. His mother then asked if he had heard any news about his father, to which Jinwoo answered sadly, no. He wondered what his mother would think if she learned he had followed in his father's footsteps. Jinwoo's father had been the reason his mother had stayed in the old apartment, despite Jinwoo making more money than most people ever would in a lifetime. He realized that his mother was still waiting for his father's return, holding on to the hope that he would come back someday. Jinwoo thought about how much his parents needed him, and the scene ended with him contemplating the upcoming Jeju Island raid. The scene then shifted to a press conference about the Jeju Island raid, where a man was showing a video of ants evolving at an astounding speed. He explained that if the number of mutants increased and overtook the entire colony, it would be considered an evolution. He showed pictures of ants from the first and second Search and Destroy missions, revealing that they initially crawled like regular ants, although they were gigantic in size. He then showed a picture from the third Search and Destroy mission, where the ants were now standing upright like humans, their heads reduced to allow for more agile movement. It had only taken 2 years for these changes to occur. The man explained that the ants were not just evolving in size, but they were also growing more human-like, with wings appearing on their backs. When asked if they could fly, the man confirmed that they could, which was why South Korea and Japan had agreed to form a united team to tackle the threat. A man in the audience commented that even a perfectly capable hunter would want to run away from such frightening creatures. A woman agreed but pointed out that a retired hunter had bravely joined the raid. The scene then cut to Jinwoo, who was reading hate comments online because his name wasn't on the Jeju Island raid list. One comment asked why Jinwoo's name wasn't included, while others mocked him, calling him the same E-rank hunter he once was. Another comment noted that even the retired hunter Min Byung-gu had joined the raid, asking where Jinwoo was. One user speculated that Jinwoo had peaced out after becoming an S-rank, calling it so cringe. Jinwoo, reading these comments, thought that he didn't care about the hate, but he did worry about his sister, Jin-ah. While there were people who recognized him and stared, he was lost in thought when he was interrupted by a call from Yoon-ho. Jinwoo asked if Yoon-ho was still staying at the motel, to which Yoon-ho responded that he had found an apartment, thanks to his mother's help. Yoon-ho mentioned that he had also found an office space and invited Jinwoo to check it out. Jinwoo arrived at the apartment, and Yoon-ho explained that the guild needed an office, so he had selected the best option near their apartment. Jinwoo questioned whether the office was too big for just the two of them, but Yoon-ho clarified that a guild needed at least 3 hunters, a guild master, a vice guild master, and an employee. Jinwoo then realized that he would need to recruit more members, though he also thought that he could simply choose a hunter to fill the headcount. Suddenly, Yoon-ho mentioned that a foreigner was looking for Jinwoo and handed him a business card. He explained that they would be in Korea until July 17th. Jinwoo wondered who this foreigner was, someone who seemed to know him. Suddenly, Jinwoo seemed alert, saying he needed to go home. Yoon-ho, confused, asked what was happening, but Jinwoo quickly used shadow exchange, surprising Yoon-ho since it was the first time he had seen it. The scene shifted to Jinwoo's neighborhood, where a thug was holding a knife to a girl, threatening to kill her if she screamed. The man was smirking as he taunted the girl, saying he loved the neighborhood because people died here all the time. Just then, a voice behind him said, "I know, right? I love this neighborhood too." The thug turned around in surprise, and Jinwoo asked if he wanted to know why he was doing such a horrible thing. The thug snarled, wondering if Jinwoo was there to lecture him. He responded that he didn't care about such things, but if he had to answer, it was because it's fun. As the thug lunged at Jinwoo, brandishing a knife, he grabbed Jinwoo's shoulder and stabbed him several times, saying that whenever he set his sights on someone weaker than him, he felt the urge to harass them. Jinwoo suddenly spoke up, saying that he could somewhat relate to that, shocking the thug as the blade did no damage. Jinwoo continued, "Once you get a taste of it, returning to normal life isn't easy," before slashing the thug's legs out. The trembling thug realized that Jinwoo was unscathed. Jinwoo then said that it would have been nice to go home before it got so dark. The girl then fled, and Jinwoo warned the thug that he had until midnight to surrender to the authorities if he wanted to live. Jinwoo told his shadow orc to kill the thug if he didn't surrender, then added that he would very much like him to live. Jinwoo then thought that he wasn't exactly sure if his high orc shadow soldier had much patience. As Jinwoo headed home, he thought about how the Jeju island raid would begin the next day. Meanwhile, Goto Ryuji, holding his phone, trembled, still thinking about the fight with Jinwoo. He couldn't shake the feeling that during his fight with Jinwoo he felt death. He reflected on what had gone wrong and realized that he had become overly sensitive after their battle. The scene then shifted with a helicopter carrying hunters to Jeju Island, where Mount Hallison visible in the distance. The chapter begins with the mission officially starting. A large number of ships are seen in various locations, one along the coast of China, another near Taiwan, and the third near Jeju Island. A massive fleet is deployed to the north of Jeju Island, consisting of 2 Sejong the Great-class destroyers, 2 KDDX-class destroyers, 4 Chungmyeong-e Sun Sin-class destroyers, 1 Kong Gamcheon-class destroyer, and 12 frigates. The next scene shifts to Jong-soo, who tells his team that they need to brace themselves, as the ants may have been alerted and could come flying at any moment. Yoon-tae asks if Jong-soo believes their strategy will work against the ants. Jong-soo responds that they won't know unless they try, and their job as the defense team is to stand guard in case anything happens. They are specifically in charge of preventing flying ants from reaching the mainland. Yoon-tae, feeling confident, declares that he can always count on Jong-soo and jokingly adds that he will follow him to the ends of the earth. The other guild members can also be seen in the background. The scene then transitions to Fame Guild, where Dongwook is saying his goodbyes to the Vice Guild Master. He reminds her to watch their backs. The Vice Guild Master responds that there isn't really anything to keep an eye on because, despite being called the defense team, they are just the standby team with nothing to do for the day. Dongwook asks his Vice Guild Master to run some tactical drills for their members since they are all gathered on deck. The Vice Guild Master points out that, since her title as Vice Guild Master doesn't come with any real responsibility, it would be hard for her to lead drills. Dongwook thanks her for her excellent management skills, which have helped the guild grow, and reminds her that it was she who designed their guild symbol and made key decisions to expand their activities. Dongwook is grateful for all her hard work. The Vice Guild Master then responds that she's not entirely thrilled about Dongwook being sent out into the field, but she just wants to tell him to make sure he returns in one piece. With that, Dongwook bids farewell to his guild members. Meanwhile, Taegyu is on the phone, angrily speaking with someone about the deployment of Minsung to the southern part of the island. He insists that the ants might show up soon, and Minsung needs to be moved as far back as possible. Taegyu then angrily asks, do they have any idea how much Minsung is worth? But his contact on the phone responds that the troops are already deployed and cannot be recalled. Taegyu just tells them to stay safe and find cover. The scene then shifts to the Hunter Association's request for the deployment of hunters from each guild to the south of the island. Among them is the Fiend Guild, including Minsung, who is surrounded by reporters. He thinks to himself that this could be a great opportunity to score some points by being in the spotlight. The hunters are stationed there because precautions had to be taken. Even if the raid were to succeed, there was still a possibility that the remaining ants would invade the mainland. Hunters from the Hunters Guild, including A-rank hunter Sung-Jinwoo, Lee Bora, Gina, and other guild members, are also stationed there. Squads were also stationed to defend the national territory, consisting of a B-rank leader, 3 C ranks, and more than 10 D ranks and E ranks. The White Tiger Guild Strike Squad, including Hunter Park Hee-jin, Yoon Ki-jung, and Go Myung-hwan, can be seen assigned to this task. Some retired hunters have also joined the mission, including Lee Ju-hee and Mr. Song, along with those who had awakened but had previously chosen not to become hunters. In total, around 5,000 of these individuals, or 1/10 of the 50,000 awakened beings in South Korea, are joining the fight. The focus then shifts to the South Korean S-rank hunters on a helicopter en route to Mount Halasan. One of them introduces himself as a cameraman from a news agency that specializes in reporting on hunters. He mentions that his job is to film the hunters in action during the raid. He also tells them that the raid will be broadcast nationwide, though there will be a 10-minute delay before the footage airs, allowing the editing team to filter things out. Yoon-ho then shakes his hand. Yoon-ho and Dong-wook have a brief conversation about the presence of a cameraman on such a dangerous mission. Yoon-ho is surprised by this, wondering what Chairman Go was thinking. Dong-wook then says to the cameraman that a successful raid is one that has someone to protect, but he still needs to take care of himself. The cameraman then answers that there is no need to worry because, despite being a cameraman, he is still a hunter and holds an A-rank license. In South Korea, many awakened individuals choose to live normal lives and avoid raids, and the cameraman is one of them. The cameraman then shares that he has 2 professions and that this isn't his first time being sent to cover dangerous locations, as he was sent before to cover a few dungeon breaks. However, he isn't sure if he'll be as helpful this time as he was in the past, as his hands can be seen trembling in nervousness. Dong-wook reassures him, saying that the Hunters Association probably allowed the cameraman to accompany them because they believe the 4th raid has a good chance of success. The cameraman thanks him for the reassurance, and Yoon-ho adds that it's good to hear him say that. Dong-wook then says that this is the first and last time civilians will witness an S-rank raid. He also adds that they've failed several times before, so everyone is eager to watch them succeed this time. Yoon-ho stresses the importance of showing them a clean victory. In his mind, he thinks that, realistically speaking, if they fail, South Korea could be wiped off on the map. He adds that the world is in dire need of heroes. The scene shifts to Byung-gu, who is talking to Yoon-ho. Yoon-ho mentions that he never thought he would see Byung-gu join the raid. Byung-gu responds by saying he joined the raid because he felt that Yoon-ho might die if he didn't have healing support, especially since Yoon-ho tends to rush into battle whenever he sees a beast. This irks Yoon-ho, who humorously denies the accusation. The other hunters in the helicopter smile at their exchange. Haein then asks Yoon-ho if he has met Jinwoo before coming here. Yoon-ho responds that he has not, and when asked why, Haein hesitates before simply saying, "No reason." Dong-wook breaks the silence by saying it looks like it's time to get down to business. As their helicopter approaches the island, Byung-gu's hands begin to tremble. The scene shifts to Goto Ryuji's group, who are on the main island. They realize they are walking through what used to be Jeju City, now eerily quiet like a ghost town. They notice the corpses of ants, seemingly cannibalized by other ants, suggesting a predator's presence. Ryuji begins the roll call for his team to start their mission. He speaks into his radio, saying, "Alpha speaking," followed by Tawada responding with, "Bravo, over," Fujishima with, "Charlie, over," and Izawa with, "Delta, over." Ryuji then orders them to open the floodgates. Immediately, they release powerful mana waves to lure the ants. The South Korean S-rank hunters in the helicopter, including Yoon-ho, watch in awe at the intensity of the mana waves. Jong-in comments that the Japanese hunters have already launched their operation. The next scene shows the ants emerging from the crater of Mount Halasan, with some engaging the South Korean hunters' helicopter. Jong-in can be seen standing at the helicopter's opening, announcing that he will handle the approaching ants. He uses his skill called Flame Spear, generating 3 spears made of fire and launching them at the approaching ants, causing explosions upon impact. Byung-gu is impressed by the display, but Jong-in humbly downplays it, stating that he expected this outcome since a small amount of firepower wouldn't be enough to defeat the ants. He warns his team to brace themselves for turbulence as he prepares to launch a massive fireball this time. With a powerful blast, the fire engulfs the ants. Jong-in notes that the ants have evolved significantly and are no longer the same as before. He says his fire attack would have sufficed in an A-rank dungeon, but the ants now have high resistance to magic, so he needs to use greater force. After that, Jong-in could be seen descending from the helicopter, riding on a fire blaze, and saying that he needed to gauge how strong the ants were. His companions were startled by his sudden descent from the helicopter. Dong-wook, observing Jong-in as he got off, quickly asked Haein if he would be fine. Haein responded swiftly, he should be fine, especially since his fire magic specializes in fighting multiple opponents. Jong-in had finally descended onto the island, only to be immediately surrounded by the ants. In an instant, he unleashed a powerful burst of fire from his position, scorching all the ants around him. He then remarked that the last time he had played with ants was when he was a child, and he still remembered the faint snapping noises every time he torched them with his lighter. But now, he said, all he could hear were fireworks as the ants exploded one by one from the impact of his fire magic. Afterward, he looked up and told his companions that they could now come down. Dong-wook hesitates, considering that, unlike their previous attempts, this time there are no escape routes, and they may get trapped in the ant tunnels. The next scene shows the South Korean S-rank hunters preparing to descend. Yoon-ho tells his team that the Japanese hunters can only stall for about an hour, so they need to defeat the queen within that time frame. Taegyu asks if anyone has something to say before they jump, but the response is simple. We've got this in the bag. Let's go. With that, the S-rank hunters leap one by one from the helicopter, ready for the battle ahead. Chapter 96 begins as Destroyer Number 2, Kaga, with Sugimoto, the Vice Guildmaster of the Blade Guild. He informs the crew that the operation will commence shortly and orders the activation of the jamming signals. Once activated, the signal targets Jeju Island, and the ants are immediately affected, with their antennas seemingly deactivated. As a result, the ants can no longer hear their queen calling for help. The scene then shifts to the Japanese Bravo team, where Tawada slashes an ant right in front of Atsushi, who is taken by surprise. Tawada scolds him, telling him to get it together and warns that if he doesn't get used to this, he'll end up dead. Meanwhile, in the Charlie team, Shimizu and Fujishima have a conversation. Shimizu suggests that it might be quicker to simply kill all the ants instead of waiting for the South Korean team to kill the queen. Fujishima responds and said maybe. He then asks where Kinzo is, to which Shimizu replies that he's playing tag and snapping the wings off ants one by one. Fujishima chuckles, commenting that Kinzo seems to be having fun, even though he's acting like a child. In the Delta team, Kei and Izawa are looking at the top of the mountain, noticing fireworks going off near the tunnels. Izawa speculates that it might be Choi Jong-in's doing. Kei comments that with his ice and Jong-in's fire, he wonders what would happen if the two of them fought. Izawa quips that it would be cold and hot. In the background, many ants can be seen frozen by Kei's skill. The scene then shifts to the ant tunnels inside Mount Halasan. The hunters mention that it was once famous for its beauty, but has now been reduced to a wasteland, nothing but an ant colony. The scene shifts to Jong-in, who has placed a flame prison at the entrance of Mount Halasan. He explains that he usually uses it to trap enemies, but now it serves as a shield to prevent ants of B rank or lower from entering. Jong-in suddenly sits down, preparing to cast a spell. He announces that he's going to find a way, and suddenly, a barrage of fireballs appears above them. He directs the fireballs into the ant tunnels. Yoon-ho watches in shock, exclaiming, "What the heck? That's dangerous," as the fireballs zip past them. Jong-in calmly explains that the ants' lair is like a labyrinth, and entering a random path could lead them back to where they started, just like his fireballs. As the fireballs travel through various tunnels, Jong-in notices one and comments, "I think I found what I'm looking for." There are no signs of explosions in this particular tunnel, indicating it likely leads deep inside. Impressed by Jong-in's skill and calmness, Yoon-ho feels reassured that having him on their team is a great asset. After that, Jong-in leads the team, saying, "Let's go in." The scene shifts to Jinwoo, who is exercising in a park. His system shows that he has completed a 10-kilometer run. At this point, his stats are as follows: Strength 219, Health 200, Agility 230, Intelligence 250, and Sense 200. His physical damage reduction is at 46%. He notices that the park, which is usually empty, is completely deserted today. He wonders if the broadcast for the Jeju Island raid has started. Jinwoo acknowledges that the South Korean and Japanese S-rank hunters are all incredibly strong, so there's no need to watch the broadcast. Even without him, he knows they are capable of completing the raid, provided everything goes according to plan. Back with the South Korean hunters, an ant is pierced by an arrow shot by Taegyu. Jong-in informs him that, aside from a few remaining ants, most have left the tunnel, confirming their predictions. Taegyu notes that this is the first time he's seen creatures like these and asks where the Queen's royal guard is. He remarks that the ants seem weak and observes that their eyes look deteriorated, which suggests they've evolved into better guards for the dark tunnels. Taegyu adds, "If that's the case, it will make things easier for us. However, if these aren't the royal guards, we can just breeze through using our firepower." Byung-gu, on the other hand, expresses concern, wondering if the Queen is nearby and whether she might have betrayed her subjects and run away. Yoon-ho dismisses the idea, stating that it's impossible because the ants are trapped on the island with nowhere to run. The cameraman, noticing the extreme darkness, wonders if his camera is picking up the area clearly, but reassures himself that the staff at headquarters will handle the editing. The team advances deeper into the tunnels, with Jong-in lighting the way with a fireball in his hand. Suddenly, Jong-in is struck with shock as they discover the ants' spawning ground. He realizes that the Queen's chamber is likely nearby. He explains that the ants they fought earlier were stationed here to protect the eggs. Jong-in adds that he will set them all on fire. Hae-in stops him, noticing an especially large, hatched egg. Byung-gu is horrified and asks, "Is that an ant egg?" He wonders aloud what could possibly hatch from it, speculating that it could be a royal guard. Before he can finish speaking, Yoon-ho taps him on the shoulder and reminds him that their goal is to defeat the Queen, urging him to forget everything else. Byung-gu remains silent, but his face shows his concern. In Yoon-ho's mind, he understands Byung-gu's apprehension, but they must focus on the task at hand. He mutters to himself, "Those monsters," as the team stares at the massive hatched egg in front of them. The scene then shifts to the Japanese Charlie team, where Shimizu, Fujishima, and Kenzo are. Shimizu teases Kenzo, saying he is a hot mess. Kenzo replies that it turned out the flying ants are peskier than he thought. He adds that they attacked using military tactics and flew in battle formation. Kenzo killed 30, but they managed to wound him in the shoulder and waist, as evidenced by the blood splattered on his body while he holds an ant's head. Shimizu jokingly asks if he wants a healing session, but warns that there's a fee. Kenzo, annoyed, tells him to stop being annoying and heal him already. Shimizu responds, saying that she has something she wants from Kenzo, but it's not money. Kenzo retorts that Shimizu makes more money than he does, mocking her for being obsessed with money at such a young age. Kenzo suddenly notices more ants heading their way and warns Shimizu to hurry up. Shimizu teases him further, but as he turns to face the approaching ants, Shimizu's head is suddenly sliced off in an instant. Kenzo is shocked, and Fujishima reacts in disbelief as they realize that Shimizu was killed by an opponent in the blink of an eye. Kenzo shouts that they need to be careful, but before he can finish, an ant with glowing red eyes charges at him. Kenzo attempts to punch it, calling it a bastard, but the ant quickly crushes his head, and in an instant, Kenzo is dead. Fujishima watches in shock as Kenzo's head is sliced off just as quickly. Fujishima dashes forward, sword in hand, preparing to attack the ant. But before he can land his strike, his head is suddenly sliced off as well, along with his sword. The chapter ends with the mysterious, powerful ant having slain the 3 Japanese S-rank hunters in an instant. Chapter 97 begins inside the tunnel, where Dongwook faces a massive ant. In his mind, he wonders if this could be a royal guard of the Queen. He notes that each of these ants seems as strong as an S-rank hunter, but despite their power, They remain beasts at the end of the day. The large ant lunges at him, colliding with his shield. Dong-wook reflects that unlike hunters who use a wide variety of battle tactics, the ant's movements are limited. Suddenly, Hae-in leaps from behind Dong-wook, executing a downward thrust with her sword while suspended in midair. Her sword pierces the large ant's head, and as she lands precisely on the sword's handle, she slashes through its entire body. After defeating the first ant, another massive one charges toward her, but with a single slash, she cuts off its head. She remarks that the bodies of these ants are surprisingly tough, tougher than she had expected. Dong-wook thinks to himself that these royal guards are unlike regular ants, but he's glad there are only a few of them. Byung-gu speaks up, reassuring them that there's no need to worry. He's here to back them up. Yoon-ho hears this and comments that it seems like Byung-gu isn't the scaredy cat he used to be. Byung-gu retorts, telling Yoon-ho to speak for himself and stop acting like an amateur, then smashes an ant with his weapon. Byung-gu tells Yoon-ho that even if they crush the skulls of these ants, they can still live for a while. The key, he says, is to cut off their limbs or ensure they're finished for good. Yoon-ho agrees, remembering what Byung-gu just pointed out. In his thoughts, Yoon-ho realizes that although the queen isn't present, her royal guards are here, and they appear to be from an older generation. He speculates that they were cast out, suggesting that these are first-generation ants, meaning that a whole new wave of second-generation guards might be waiting for them up ahead. Byung-gu suddenly speaks again, telling everyone to make sure they're prepared for what lies ahead. He smiles and casts a spell from his book, which begins to glow. As he chants, an aura envelopes them, and various symbols and colors representing their specialties appear. They feel an overwhelming surge of strength coursing through their bodies. Jong-in remarks that it's not just a simple refresh. They all feel stronger than ever before. Yoon-ho, feeling the boost, comments that he now feels ready to take on a whole group of beasts and win. He suggests they each take on 10 ants, while the cameraman, who has A-rank combat skills, offers to help take down 1 or 2 stragglers if needed. Yoon-ho replies to Byung-gu, asking if he thinks he's crazy enough to rely on a healer, as the buffs he gave them should be more than enough. Yoon-ho grins, eager to show what they can do. Meanwhile, Team D Delta, consisting of Kei and Izawa, rushes to check on Team Charlie after losing contact with them. Izawa exclaims his disbelief, questioning what Team Charlie is up to. Kei reminds him to slow down, and when they finally arrive, Izawa wonders aloud if they're stationed there, noticing the numerous dead ants from the battle. As Izawa surveys the corpses, he realizes this was evidence of a battle, and it looks like Team Charlie defeated the ants with ease. Kei wonders where Team Charlie has gone, just as Izawa notices Fujishima's eyeglasses. Upon looking farther, Izawa's face falls, and he mutters in disbelief, "No way. This is impossible." Kei suddenly stops and grasps his mask, removing it and vomiting violently. Izawa asks him what the problem is. Kei, still shaken, mentions an awful smell, a rotten stench like nothing he's ever smelled before. As he looks ahead, he realizes the source of the smell is coming from within the trees. His eyes widen in horror, and he screams in fear. Quickly, he generates a massive block of ice with his skill, creating a huge explosion that knocks down several trees. Behind the ice shield he created, Kei's fear is evident in his eyes. Just then, the ice shield, with Kei inside, cracks under the force of the enemy's strike. Back inside the tunnel, the South Korean hunters have defeated the ants. Byung-gu complains that they've wasted too much time on these ants, but Jong-in counters, stating it only took 5 minutes to defeat so many ants. They've made good progress. In Yoon-ho's mind, he reflects on the situation, amazed at how Hae-in seems to have gained new strength, as if Byung-gu had given her wings. He figures she's probably defeated twice as many ants in such a short period as he has. After 15 minutes of progress, they realize they only have about 30 minutes left before returning to their starting point. Dong-wook thinks to himself that they must find a way to complete the raid before time runs out. Just then, Hae-in suddenly mentions that she smells something and guesses it's the queen's scent. She believes there are also royal guards nearby. Yoon-ho responds that he'll check it out, focusing his eyes on the darker part of the tunnel. He can clearly see the end of the tunnel, and with a beast-like gaze, he exclaims, "That's the queen." He adds that the queen is at the very back, with 8 guards stationed in front of her. Dong-wook turns to Hae-in and asks if she's ready to face the guards. Hae-in confidently replies that she's ready and assures him, "You can count on me." At that moment, a massive blaze erupts, and a fire dragon, summoned by Jong-in, appears, its fiery eyes glowing like those of a beast. Jong-in remarks that usually he holds back, but this time, he feels it would be a waste not to use his full power. As an ant attempts to attack him from behind, it's struck by multiple arrows from Taegyu, who calls out, "Don't worry, I've got your back." Meanwhile, Yoon-ho, feeling the newfound strength, begins to change. His armor cracks, and his appearance shifts into that of a beast. A fierce white aura envelopes him as he declares that he doesn't care if he turns into this hideous form, as long as he can exterminate every single one of these damn insects. Yoon-ho suddenly crushes 2 ants with his bare hands, his claws slicing through them effortlessly. Hae-in, watching him, realizes for the first time that this is Yoon-ho's beast form. The chapter ends with Yoon-ho letting out a powerful roar after crushing the 2 ants. Chapter 98 begins with Dong-wook successfully delivering Hae-in to the guards, saying, "I'll leave them to you, Hae-in." Hearing this, Hae-in quickly reacts, planting her sword into the ground and activating a skill called Quake of Provocation. The skill causes a powerful shockwave that provokes the guards, forcing them to attack her. As Dong-wook observes their formation falling apart, he immediately rushes to the queen. In his mind, he understands that the queen must be kept contained until all the guards are defeated. Standing in front of the queen with a shield for protection and a spear in hand, Dong-wook calls out, "Hey, over here." Meanwhile, the cameraman, observing the situation, wonders if the real battle has finally begun. A person on the radio mentions that the viewership ratings have already surpassed 80%, prompting the cameraman to move closer to get a better angle. However, just as he approaches, a sudden hand pulls him back. It's Byung-gu, who warns the cameraman that they are currently in an S-rank dungeon and that no one is responsible for his life here. Byung-gu tells him to stay behind him because the real fight is about to start. A green aura surrounds Byung-gu as the cameraman watches in awe. He recalls hearing people say that healers are not skilled in combat, but looking at Byung-gu, he realizes that this is a lie. Byung-gu looks more capable of fighting than him, an A-rank hunter. The scene shifts to a house in South Korea, where an elderly woman tells her husband that the hunters are about to engage in the raid. The husband, uninterested, responds dismissively, saying he doesn't care. The wife, however, insists that they should watch, and the reporters on TV said the hunters will be sure to defeat the ants for good this time. The husband replies that those guys are always just talk, and that he doesn't pay them any mind anymore. His wife responds that they need to watch, even though it's painful, especially since they are avenging their only child, who was lost in the raid. The husband, not responding, continues reading his newspaper, but the wife remains firm in her resolve. Though it's unclear who their child was, based on my theory, I believe they are the parents of Eun-sak, one of the hunters who died in the second Jeju Island raid with Yoon-ho and Byung-gu. After that, the old woman continues watching and mutters, "For crying out loud, what a grumpy old man." Meanwhile, on the TV, it is announced that the South Korean hunters have commenced their raid against the queen ant and are currently in the queen's chamber. They report that the largest ant ever seen by mankind is standing before the hunters. The news also mentions that Ma Dong-wook is fending off the queen alone but needs backup. The other hunters must defeat the remaining guards before they can assist him. Suddenly, a loud cheer erupts from the neighbors as the news says that Yoon-ho has defeated one of the guards. The elderly woman comments, saying, "It's a little scary, but it sounds like everyone is cheering for them." The scene transitions to a group of people watching the live broadcast. The news reports that only 4 guards remain. In a restaurant, a young couple watches on the phone and hears that only 3 guards are left. A billboard also displays that only 2 guards remain, and after that, they can finally attack the queen. The news announces that victory is within reach. Back at the elderly couple's house, when the husband hears that victory is close, he rushes to the TV, and his wife looks at him in surprise. The news then reports that all the guards have been defeated. The husband comments that this is their 4th raid and that they must win this time. "Don't you think so?" he asks his wife. His eyes shine with hope. The news then announces that the only obstacle left is the queen ant. Once she is defeated, the hunters will be able to eliminate the remaining ants. The scene transitions to the broadcasting office, where the viewership rating has now hit 85%, setting a new record. It's also reported that South Korea is about to be added to the list of countries that have cleared an S-rank gate, a list that currently includes only the United States, China, Russia, and France. In the next scene, the S-rank hunters face the queen ant. Dong-wook orders them to close in on her. Lim Tae-gyu shoots countless arrows at the queen's head, while Yoon-ho, without hesitation, declares, "Don't be scared." A queen without guards is nothing but a scarecrow, and slashes at her foot with his sharp claws. The queen's eyes suddenly spark, and she releases a corrosive liquid from her mouth, hitting Dong-wook and Yoon-ho. Byung-gu quickly casts a healing spell, and both of them are unharmed. Smiling, Byung-gu remarks that he should have been the target of the queen's attack. The queen charges at Byung-gu, but Dong-wook blocks her with his shield, saying he won't let her attack their healers so easily. Jong-in then announces to everyone to stand back as he casts a powerful fire spell that engulfs the queen in flames. He then raises his hand again, unleashing another, stronger burst of fire that creates a massive explosion. Yoon-ho, thinking as he observes the queen, says that from his years of experience, he can tell she is on the brink of death and that victory is within reach. However, the queen suddenly lets out a deafening roar, one so powerful that it sends a shockwave across the tunnel. Yoon-ho wonders whether it's a roar or a death cry. Something feels different, and he realizes that the queen may be calling for help. The scene shifts to Sugimoto, who, in a state of shock, informs Goto Ryuji that the ants are retreating back into the tunnels and that the jamming signals are no longer working. Ryuji is stunned and exclaims, "What?" He thinks to himself, "What on earth is happening?" as he watches the ants retreat back into the tunnels. Back inside the tunnels, Hae-in delivers the final blow to the queen, slicing off her head. She looks around and asks, "It's over, right?" Tae-gyu confirms that they are now the 7th team in the world to clear an S-rank gate. However, Yoon-ho senses that something is wrong and remarks, "Wait, something's not right." Dong-wook then alerts the group, as it is reported that the ants are swarming toward them and they need to leave immediately. The team is shocked by this news. Hae-in asks, "What?" while Tae-gyu wonders if the Japanese S-rank hunters were unable to hold off the ants for even an hour. Dong-wook, uncertain, replies that the association is also trying to figure out what's happening. Suddenly, Jong-in notices that the flame prison he created at the entrance has been destroyed. Just then, the team is struck by an overwhelming aura that makes it difficult to move. A powerful ant, unlike any they have faced before, emerges from the shadows. Yoon-ho, in shock, says that this doesn't make sense as he focuses on the powerful black ant with red eyes. Suddenly, it lets out a terrifying roar that creates an enormous shockwave felt across the island. The chapter ends with Yoon-ho, stunned by the creature's power, wondering aloud, how can a beast possess such strength? Chapter 99 begins with Hae-in collapsing to her knees, covering her nose due to the overwhelming dark energy emanating from the ant before them. In her mind, she can hardly believe such a menacing energy exists. Fear is clearly visible on her face. She realizes that the creature before them is no ordinary beast. Even the sound of its footsteps sends shivers down their spines. Dong-wook, realizing there is no time to waste, thinks they must defeat the beast quickly. As the ant moves, it casually walks past Dong-wook, but as it gets closer, he can feel an intense fear washing over him, as though his bones were being crushed. The ant heads straight toward the queen and stands before her, observing the dead creature. As the hunters stare at it, they suddenly feel an overwhelming sense of dread in their chests. The ant opens its claws and releases a terrifying roar. The force of the roar creates a shockwave, causing the hunters to collapse to their knees under the pressure of its energy. A dark red aura surrounds the ant, and its gaze focuses on Hae-in, who can barely stand under the intensity of the creature's presence. In the next moment, the ant appears behind Hae-in, catching her completely off guard. She can barely move before it delivers a powerful punch to her side. The impact is so strong that she coughs up blood, and she crashes into the tunnel wall from the force. Seeing this, Dong-wook screams Hae-in's name, but before he can react, the ant is already standing before him. With a single punch, it shatters Dong-wook's shield. Dong-wook tries to strike the creature with his sword, but the ant easily grabs him and slices through his arm. Blood splatters as the ant's claws cut deep into him. In a flash, the ant turns its attention to Yoon-ho and slashes him with a swift blow that incapacitates him as well. Jong-in tries to cast a spell, but before he can finish, the ant slashes him across his body, defeating him instantly. Meanwhile, Taegyu, from a distance, launches magic arrows, believing he has a clear shot. He is confident that he won't miss this time. However, to his shock, the ant effortlessly grabs his arrow in mid-flight. The ant then crushes the arrow with its claw. In a split second, it delivers a crushing punch to Taegyu, sending him flying. Dong-wook, still recovering from the ant's earlier attack, manages to launch an attack at the creature, causing it to retreat. Dong-wook says that his arm may have been cut off, but he has Byung-gu by his side, as it becomes clear that Dong-wook's arm has fully healed. Meanwhile, Byung-gu uses a skill called Disguise, a self-defense technique similar to camouflage, which conceals all traces of his presence. In Byung-gu's mind, the only downside is that the user cannot move, but it's still a handy skill to have as a healer. Even though the ant wants to finish him off, it cannot locate him. He also thinks that as long as he's there to heal his teammates, they won't be easily defeated. Dong-wook lunged with a punch, but the ant easily evaded the blow. It then seized Dong-wook's foot and swung him around multiple times like a ragdoll. Dong-wook struggled, his body bruised and battered. From a concealed location, Byung-gu, employing his disguise skill, healed Dong-wook. Despite this intervention, the ant's gaze suddenly shifted towards Byung-gu. A wave of fear washed over the healer, but he reassured himself that his disguise was still active, and the ant couldn't possibly know his location. Yet, the creature remained focused on him. Just then, Yoon-ho cried out Byung-gu's name, knowing the ant had already located his position and that he was in danger. Byung-gu looked up, just in time to feel something pierce his back. The ant's claw had impaled him. His grip on the book he was holding loosened, and he stared, stunned, as the claw tore through his body. Yoon-ho, helpless, can only watch in horror as Byung-gu falls. He too is unable to move, trapped by the immense fear and power of the beast before them. Chapter 100 opened with the ant stabbing Byung-gu. The scene showed the ant behind him as Byung-gu called out for Yoon-ho. Then, he uttered a single, desperate word, "Run." As Yoon-ho stared at Byung-gu, a horrific event unfolded. The ant devoured Byung-gu's head right before their very eyes. The other hunters watched in stunned horror. Consumed by rage, Yoon-ho attacked the ant, but the ant easily stopped him, grabbing his neck and lifting him effortlessly. As Yoon-ho hung in the air, struggling against the ant's grip, he heard a voice telling him to run. Looking at the ant's face, he heard Byung-gu's voice repeating the same warning. Yoon-ho could only call the ant a bastard. Suddenly, the ant spoke. It revealed that the hunters were all weak. It acknowledged that their queen had been defeated, but added that killing all the soldiers on their side was not enough. As it spoke, memories of Yoon-ho and Byung-gu flashed before the hunters' eyes. It is explained that by consuming its prey, it not only gained their life, but also absorbed their strength and knowledge. After this, the beast asked who their king was. As Yoon-ho hung helplessly, struggling to breathe as the ant choked him, he had no idea what the ant meant by king. The ant then revealed that Hae-in had also been defeated and that Jong-in was injured. Meanwhile, the cameraman, paralyzed by fear, could barely stand. Suddenly, the ant paused and turned its attention to the outside of the tunnel. It said that it felt a strong presence coming from outside and, in an instant, flew toward the exit, releasing its grip on Yoon-ho. The impact left Yoon-ho in a nearly critical state. Yoon-ho, still gasping for breath, thought to himself that the strong presence outside must be Goto Ryuji. He then realized they had no time to sit and wait. They needed to leave immediately before the ant returned. His thoughts were interrupted as he was taken aback by the sight of countless ants approaching them. The scene shifted outside the tunnel, where Goto Ryuji, along with Ishida and Hoshino, were heading towards the location of their other team members. Ishida remarked that something wasn't right, as they had lost contact with Team Charlie, and now it seemed they had also lost contact with Team Delta. Ryuji responded, suggesting that there might be a signal problem, but assured them they should still be within range. Afterward, Ryuji contacted Team Bravo. Tawada answered, stating, "Bravo here, alive and well, over." Ryuji inquired whether they had also lost contact with Team Delta and Charlie. Tawada confirmed that they had, and the only communication they were receiving was from Team Alpha. Tawada then asked if they wanted them to check on their teams. Ryuji replied that they were already on it and just needed to finish their task at the rendezvous point. Tawada acknowledged, saying, "Roger that." Suddenly, Ryuji received a call. He asked if there was something he had missed reporting. A man's voice came through the phone, saying, "Goto, it's me." Ryuji recognized the voice and responded, "Hello, Mr. Matsumoto." The scene then shifted to a ship near China, where a crew member and the captain were having a conversation. The crew member mentioned that it seemed South Korea had taken on a daring mission. He added that he still doubted the ants would fly all the way to China. The captain responded, saying that the Japanese were eagerly helping the South Koreans, which meant Goto Ryuji was desperately trying to become a national hunter. The crew member agreed, noting that all national-level hunters had cleared an S-rank gate before, and despite Ryuji's impressive record, he had yet to clear one himself. The captain then spoke, almost to himself, "I wonder." The crew member asked what he meant, but the captain didn't continue. Instead, he said, "Oh, nothing. It just seems like the perfect excuse." He then added that Goto Ryuji still had a long way to go, as he put on his cap. The crew member asked if that was his opinion, to which the captain replied, "If you had seen Liu Ji Gang in action, you'd understand what I mean." The crew member chuckled and said, "After just one encounter watching Liu Ji Gang, you're already a fan, huh?" The captain replied, "Pretty much." He then added, "In any case, I have a feeling that this raid will spell doom for one of the two countries." The scene shifted back to Team Alpha, where Goto Ryuji and his team had arrived at the location of Team Delta and Charlie. Ryuji was taken aback by what he saw. Only the lifeless bodies of their fellow Japanese hunters remained. They were all dead. Ryuji was speechless, and the person on the phone, Mr. Matsumoto, asked what had happened, but Ryuji couldn't find the words to reply. Ishida and Hoshino's faces reflected the disbelief they felt, unable to accept the grim reality of their fallen comrades. After a moment, Ryuji spoke up, answering Mr. Matsumoto. He told him that some of their hunters had been found dead. Mr. Matsumoto replied, "Then it seems they suffered unnecessary losses. Didn't we purposefully choose to fight the mutant ants to avoid a situation like this?" "That's correct," Ryuji responded. He added, "There's no need to worry. It just means that these hunters were weak." Mr. Matsumoto's voice responded, cold and harsh as always. "Well, as long as you're around, losing a few others isn't a big deal." Ryuji responded simply, "Indeed." Mr. Matsumoto asked, "Is South Korea currently facing off with the Queen?" Ryuji answered, "Yes, sir. A few moments ago, there was a signal jamming issue, and the ants have returned to the Queen's location. I'm concerned there might be another shift in events, but as of now, things seem under control." Mr. Matsumoto then asked, "Do you think the South Korean team will make it out alive? What are their chances of survival?" Before answering, Ryuji thought briefly of Jin-woo, who had not joined the raid. He then replied, "Based on my experience with South Korean hunters, their current raid team has 0% chance of survival." Mr. Matsumoto responded with, "Good," before adding, "The Japanese hunters did their best to ensure the Jeju Island raid was a success, but unfortunately, they were forced to retreat when all the South Korean hunters were defeated. Goto's attempt to become a national-level hunter was tragically foiled." He smirked, saying, "I'm sure the press will eat this up. At least our ultimate goal was achieved, the annihilation of South Korea's S-ranks." Mr. Matsumoto then told Ryuji, "Pull out of there." Ryuji responded, "Understood." He instructed his team to pull out as well, and his two companions agreed. They decided to return to the bodies later. Before Ryuji could say anything else, a sudden attack jolted them, resulting in Ishida's head being sliced off. Ryuji narrowly blocked the incoming attack with his sword. Hoshino screamed Ishida's name in shock as she witnessed the brutal attack. Ryuji, now resolute, told Hoshino, "I'll handle this." He He thought to himself that they weren't facing ordinary ants. He quickly ordered Hoshino, "Get to Bravo team. Hurry." Hoshino hesitated, replying, but Ryuji cut her off, saying, "If this is a strong beast, you'll only get in the way." A powerful aura began to emanate from Ryuji. "This ant has quite a threatening presence," he said. The ant looked at Ryuji and asked, "Are you the king?" It stood tall, holding Ishida's head in its grip. A dark red aura surrounded it. Ryuji was taken aback. He had never encountered an ant that could speak. With a smirk, he responded, "Is that your question?" "Why? Yes, I am the king," and raised his sword. A powerful aura radiated from him as he prepared to face the ant. Without warning, the ant opened its claws, letting out a deafening roar. Ryuji was stunned and confused, wondering why the ant wielded such powerful magic. He recalled a similar feeling from once before, and the face of Jinwoo flashed in his mind. Just then, his sword snapped, and the severed head fell to the ground. In an instant, even the strongest hunter in Japan had been defeated. The scene shifted to the tunnel, where the South Korean S-rank hunters were surrounded by a horde of ants. The only thing protecting them now was Jong-in's fire magic. They were backed into a corner, heavily injured from the relentless assault of the ants. Yoon-ho asked Jong-in if he could increase the intensity of his fire. Jong-in replied, "If I do that, it will burn up every last bit of oxygen in this place." Yoon-ho thought to himself that they had all sustained fatal injuries, and Byung-gu had been doing his best to heal their wounds, but it still wasn't enough to return them to full strength. Of all the members, only Jong-in remained their hope, and their only chance was that his potent flames would be enough to defeat the ants. Jong-in's firepower continued to rage, burning through the ants, but despite this, some of them were still getting dangerously close. Yoon-ho wondered if this was how it would all end. Suddenly, a shadow rose from the ground, stopping two ants that were closing in on them. Yoon-ho was shocked and puzzled, wondering who this black soldier was who had come to their aid. The chapter concluded with a close-up of the black soldier's face, with a location in South Korea visible in the background. As it zoomed in further, Jinwoo appeared, standing in the distance. His mouth parted slightly, and with a single, deliberate word, he spoke, "Exchange." The chapter begins in the tunnel where the cameraman is seen, with ants rapidly approaching. In front of the cameraman, an ant beast looms. The cameraman lowers his head, lost in thought, remembering his father. He mutters, "I can't believe the last thing I said to my dad was, 'Have you eaten yet?' If only he had known how things would turn out, he would have had more conversations with him." In his final moments, he closes his eyes, awaiting the inevitable attack from the ants. But unexpectedly, a sword pierces through the two ants rushing toward him, delivered by a shadow soldier. The scene shifts to the broadcast station, where the head of the station is visibly distressed. They've just witnessed their hunters being utterly defeated, and he can't believe it was all due to a single ant. How is that even possible? He wonders aloud. One of the staff informs him that their phone lines are about to go down from an overwhelming number of calls from viewers. The supervisor responds coldly, "So what? Did they expect us to show the hunters being torn apart on national television?" He mutters in despair, "It's all over. We're done for." Just then, one of the staff members shouts, "Sir, someone has appeared at the scene." The head quickly turns to him, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" the head asks. The staff member urges him to look at the screen, and when the head does, he exclaims, "Sweet Mother of God." He immediately orders the staff to prepare for a live broadcast, though one of them hesitates, warning that without delay, they can't edit the footage if something goes horribly wrong. The head responds, "We've already stopped once. It can't get any worse from here. It's all or nothing now. We're going live, no matter what." On the screen, flashes Jinwoo and his shadows begin to appear. In his mind, the head realizes that their fate now lies in the hands of Jinwoo. The scene then transitions to Jinwoo appears in the tunnel, his powerful aura enveloping him after using his shadow exchange ability. Alongside him, all of his shadow soldiers, including his generals, stand ready for battle. It is evident that they, too, are releasing strong auras. Jinwoo calls out to Iron and uses his skill, Shout of Provocation, releasing a powerful roar that provokes the ants, drawing them all toward him. Jinwoo then taps Iron in approval, saying, "Good work." Jinwoo draws the Demon King's daggers in both hands, weapons he obtained from the Demon Castle after defeating Baron. These daggers grant him plus 220 attack stats and additional bonus stats, depending on the caster's strength. In an instant, Jinwoo slices through countless ants as he moves, while Tusk uses his magic shield to protect the wounded S-rank hunters. Dong-wook, confused, asks, "What's going on? Who's fighting the ants?" Yoon-ho, watching intently, reassures him, "Looks like we're in good hands." As they watch Jinwoo annihilate the ants, Yoon-ho adds, "Everything's going to be okay." One ant suddenly charges, but in a single motion, Igris crushes it with his hand before slamming it into the ground. Two more ants attack from behind, but with a swift strike of his sword, Igris slices them in half. Tank, not to be outdone, devours one of the ants, while Iron also takes down more. As Jinwoo observes that many of the ants are now dead, he declares, "It's time to ramp things up." He says the word, "arise," and the ants that were killed slowly begin to rise, now his shadows. The cameraman, who has been watching these events unfold, is in shock, unsure of what he's witnessing. The ants they fought and killed earlier are now resurrected as Jinwoo's shadow soldiers. Meanwhile, the broadcast station is desperately trying to reach the cameraman, urging him to explain what's happening, as the entire country is watching. The cameraman, however, can only respond, "I'm not sure what's happening either." He's baffled, especially since the ants seem to be fighting one another. The scene then shifts as Jinwoo approaches the wounded S-rank hunters and gathers them together. He pulls out a bottle and, realizing he can't make transactions, simply says, "Please drink this, and I'll explain later." Once the hunters drink the contents, their wounds begin to heal, and their strength is restored. Dong-wook, noticing that Hae-in is still unconscious, asks why she hasn't recovered. Jinwoo replies, "She suffered serious injuries. I couldn't heal her with my abilities." As Jinwoo looks at Hae-in, he thinks to himself that she seems to be weakening. Turning to Dong-wook, Jinwoo says, "It's time to leave. We need to get out of here before more ants show up." Dong-wook agrees, "Right. Let's go." However, just as they begin to move, Jinwoo notices something on the side. The powerful ant the S-ranks fought earlier is back, its dark energy radiating as it approaches them. It speaks, saying, "Your king is not outside. He was not the king," before asking, "Is there another you call king?" Yoon-ho, upon seeing the creature, mutters, "Has he defeated Ryuji too?" Meanwhile, Dong-wook curses under his breath at the sight of the terrifying beast. Jinwoo, sensing the intense aura coming from the ant, tells Dong-wook, "Please take care of Cha-han." Dong-wook then shouts Jinwoo's name in concern, knowing just how powerful this ant is. However, Jinwoo continues without faltering, thinking this ant is the reason I couldn't detect Ryuji's shadow. As Jinwoo faces the powerful ant, the two are surrounded by an overwhelming aura that clashes in the air. The ant then asks if Jinwoo is the king of the humans. Jinwoo simply replies, "A talking insect? Huh." The chapter ends with the two standing close to each other, their auras clashing as they prepare for the next battle. The chapter begins with Jinwoo facing the ant beast. As he locks eyes with it, Jinwoo feels the presence of Ryuji within him, sensing the lingering aura of his power. The ant comments that Jinwoo has a quite threatening presence. Suddenly, the ant releases a powerful roar, creating a shockwave that reverberates through the area. Despite the overwhelming force, Jinwoo remains unmoved, standing firmly in place. With a confident smile, he remarks, "Now you're behaving more like an insect." The scene shifts to Seoul, 5 minutes earlier, where heavy rain pours down. A cell phone screen shows a message that the broadcast of the raid is unavailable. Hunters Joo-hee and Mr. Song watch with concern. Mr. Song wonders aloud what has happened to the other hunters, while Joo-hee questions what the ant was earlier. Meanwhile, hunters Jong-soo and Yoon-tae are equally shocked. Jong-soo exclaims, "What the hell?" in disbelief. The sudden cutoff of the broadcast leaves them stunned, and Yoon-tae asks, "What's happening?" Then, a somber announcement fills the broadcast, confirming the death of Hunter Min Byung-gu. The camera shifts to other hunters on the main island, including Min Sung, who is stunned by the tragic news. The report continues, revealing that other hunters remain trapped inside the tunnels, their fate still uncertain. The Vice Guild Master of Fame Guild, along with members of the White Tiger Guild, watches the broadcast, their faces etched with worry. Suddenly, new information emerges. An unknown hunter has appeared at the scene. The broadcast resumes, and when the White Tiger Guild members see this mysterious figure, their jaws drop in shock. "What? No way!" they exclaim in disbelief. The scene transitions to Japan, where a man listens intently to his last conversation with Ryuji. The exchange reveals that Ryuji, while speaking to a beast, said, "This ant has quite a threatening presence." The beast then asks, "Are you the king?" To which Ryuji confidently responds, "Why? Yes, in fact, I am the king." Sugimoto then comments that this was the last they heard from Ryuji. The man listening, identified as Matsumoto Shigeo, the chairman of the Japanese Hunters Association, is left stunned, biting down on his cigarette. Just then Sugimoto, standing with his back turned, calls out to Mr. Matsumoto as he observes the radar screen. He informs him that the powerful ant has returned to the Queen's chamber. In disbelief, Matsumoto asks if the South Korean team is still alive. Sugimoto confirms that it appears so, and adds that they are detecting more mana signals from another being. Matsumoto, eager for more details, urges them to turn on the TV so he can watch the live coverage from the South Korean press. Next, the scene shifts to Jinwoo's house, where Gina hears a strange noise, as if something is being struck. Concerned, she asks her mother what is going on. Her mother apologizes, explaining that the TV suddenly stopped working. She then asks where Jinwoo is, as he had mentioned he was going somewhere, but wouldn't be gone long. Suddenly, Gina rushes to her room. Their mother, shaking her head, mutters, "Both you and Jinwoo are all over the place today." Inside her room, Gina immediately opens her cell phone and is stunned by what she sees. The scene cuts to Chairman Go, who is so excited watching the live broadcast that he accidentally breaks the handle of his chair. He exclaims, "That's Sung-Jinwoo." A doctor standing next to him advises him to calm down. The focus returns to the tunnels, where Jinwoo and the ant beast face off, locked in a tense standoff. The ant beast throws a powerful punch directly at Jinwoo's face. The force of the punch shatters the ground beneath him, creating a massive shockwave that sends rocks flying through the air. The blast reaches Jong-in and Yoon-ho, who are both stunned by the sheer intensity of the impact. Jong-in remarks, "A mage should never get so close to an enemy," while Yoon-ho adds, "It seems Jinwoo underestimated his opponent, and now he's taking a hit." As the dust settles, the ant mocks Jinwoo, calling him weak and insisting that he isn't the king. However, before it can finish its taunt, the ant is left speechless, witnessing Jinwoo standing tall, completely unfazed by the attack. Jong-in and Yoon-ho are equally shocked, unable to believe that not even the punch has managed to move Jinwoo. With a casual flick, Jinwoo spits the blood from his mouth, his eyes burning with intensity as he glares at the ant. Jinwoo activates his skill, Commander's Touch, and a powerful aura surrounds his hand. The ant, stunned by the sudden surge of power, is forced back by the skill's effect, causing it to fall to its knees. Without giving the ant a chance to recover, Jinwoo delivers a devastating punch straight to its head. The shockwave from the punch crashes the ant into the tunnel wall, causing an explosive impact. The hunters watching the battle are left in awe. Dongwook, in particular, is stunned, his voice filled with disbelief as he asks Yoon-ho and Jong-in, "Are you sure Jinwoo is a mage hunter?" Yoon-ho, still in shock, replies, "I knew he was powerful, but I never imagined he could be this strong." The ant recovers quickly and roars in fury before charging toward Jinwoo again. Jinwoo, studying the ant's sturdy body, thinks that it must be due to its exoskeleton. "How irritating," he mutters before activating Commander's Touch once again. As the ant attacks, Jinwoo effortlessly parries the strike with his arm, creating another shockwave that ripples through the air. He follows up with a counterattack, landing a powerful punch to the ant's body, but the ant retaliates with another punch aimed directly at Jinwoo's face. Jinwoo counters once more, delivering a devastating blow to the ant's head, nearly shattering its exoskeleton. The battle intensifies as their strength continues to clash, and powerful mana waves surge between them. The cameraman, struggling to stay upright from the sheer force of the mana, comments, "I am an A-rank hunter, but even I can barely stand due to the waves alone." As the ant's exoskeleton starts to crack under the relentless assault, it questions how Jin-woo can continue to overpower him in terms of strength. The battle reaches its peak, and the ant stares at Jin-woo in disbelief, unable to comprehend what's happening. With another surge of power, Jin-woo prepares to strike again, his aura glowing ominously as he readies himself for the next blow. The chapter ends with the ant's final words, filled with confusion and fear. Who the hell is this guy? Chapter 103 begins in the tunnel where Jin-woo is still facing off against the ant, but this time, it's different. The once confident ant now shows fear and confusion on its face as it stares at Jin-woo. In the next scene, both combatants land simultaneous punches, creating a powerful impact. They both stagger backward, but the ant soon notices cracks forming on its exoskeleton. It questions how this is even possible. Before the ant can recover, Jin-woo dashes toward it and delivers a powerful punch, almost knocking the ant off its feet. But in this moment, the ant finds an opportunity to counter by releasing a tail from its mouth, striking Jin-woo, pushing him back. Jin-woo realizes that the tail has poison, noting that it likely came from the cone snail the ant consumed, granting it the power of a paralysis poison, one of the deadliest substances created by nature. The poison becomes even more lethal when combined with the concentrated mana in the ant's body. Seeing Jin-woo stagger, the ant arrogantly remarks, "You tried your best, human," and then suddenly declares, "Now die," launching a quick attack aimed at Jin-woo's head. The scene shifts outside the tunnel, where Minoru is seen sitting hunched over. Tawada is speaking to him, mentioning that she received a call from Mr. Sugimoto and asking what happened. Minoru responds with a trembling voice, saying, "We can't win." His face shows clear fear as he continues, "What we're up against is a monster. Forget about S ranks. No one, not even the entire population combined, is strong enough to face that beast." He then adds that neither Mr. Goto nor they themselves stand a chance. Tawada grabs Minoru by the collar, furious, and lifts him up, demanding to know if he's lost his mind. But Minoru repeats that no one can stop that monster. Tawada lets go of Minoru and shoves him aside, calling him pathetic, before muttering that the real problem is just beginning. "Damn it," he adds, his frustration growing. Inside the tunnel, Jin-woo holds back the ant's attack by gripping its arm tightly. The ant, stunned and expecting Jin-woo to be poisoned and unable to move, is caught off guard. Before it can recover from the shock, Jin-woo lands a powerful punch directly to the ant's face, sending it crashing into the tunnel wall. At that moment, Jin-woo's system notifies him that he has successfully detoxified. He senses a strange emotion coming from the ant, which seems to feel a sense of happiness. Jin-woo realizes that the ant had likely expected the poison to incapacitate him, and its reaction might be one of relief or satisfaction from that assumption. However, as Jin-woo's heightened senses continue to evolve, he begins to detect a shift in the ant's emotions. The beast, which once exuded confidence, now seems to be growing fearful. Jin-woo reflects on this, recognizing that his enhanced abilities are allowing him to sense the emotional state of the ant. Meanwhile, Jin-woo becomes aware also of the growing anxiety among his teammates, especially as he notices Heian weakening. Jin-woo realizes that he must end the fight quickly. Determined to finish this, he leaps high into the air, aiming a powerful kick at the ant. The force of the strike cracks the ground beneath him, but the ant narrowly dodges the attack and suddenly disappears. The sudden disappearance of the ant shocks the other hunters, leaving them confused and questioning where it went. Jin-woo then quickly looks up. He spots the ant hovering above, having skillfully evaded his attack. In the ant's mind, it realizes that Jin-woo is resistant to poison and that trying to overpower him would be a waste of time. Suddenly, the ant's body begins to shrink. It declares that while strength may be Jin-woo's greatest attribute, there's no point in facing him head-on. The true strength of the ant, it says, is its speed. Its body continues to shrink as it contracts, focusing its energy to increase its speed. The ant then announces, "Playtime's over." Jin-woo, standing below, prepares himself, holding two daggers and waiting for the ant's next move. In the following scenes, the ant is ready for a quick strike, and Jinwoo braces himself as well. The ant launches a swift attack, but Jinwoo dodges it. In retaliation, Jinwoo slashes with his dagger, hitting the ant's face, though its exoskeleton prevents a clean cut. Jinwoo attempts another strike, but the ant blocks it with its claws. The ant pushes Jinwoo back, but he uses the force of his feet against the tunnel wall to propel himself back toward the ant with incredible speed. The two exchange blows at lightning speed, almost invisible to the eye. The ant realizes that not only is Jinwoo keeping up with its speed, but he's actually faster. As Jinwoo continues to chase it down, the ant begins to question if this is truly possible. Jinwoo realizes that the ant is as strong as the Demon King, if not stronger. However, he also knows that after defeating the Demon King, leveling up, acquiring stronger weapons, and inflicting noticeable damage to the ant's exoskeleton, he now has the power to finish the battle. He notices that the ant's exoskeleton is beginning to crumble. Taking advantage of this, Jinwoo launches a flurry of slashes, each hitting the ant's exoskeleton with such force that it can barely move. As the ant struggles, Jinwoo senses that this is his chance. He activates his critical attack skill and releases a series of strikes, attacking different parts of the ant's body. Suddenly, Jinwoo's system notifies him that his critical attack has been upgraded to its maximum level, Mutilate. He is stunned by the upgrade. The ant, sensing its impending defeat, flies away, trying to distance itself from Jinwoo. Jinwoo, undeterred, shouts, "Where do you think you're going?" and quickly activates his new skill. In the blink of an eye, Jinwoo delivers a barrage of multiple slashes, each strike landing with precision. The ant, overwhelmed by the speed and force of the attacks, is unable to move. As the final slash lands, Jinwoo slices through the ant's hand, causing it to roar in agony. From a distance, the ant looks at Jinwoo, asking itself if it truly has no advantage over this human. No, the ant says to itself, suddenly roaring with immense power. The sound of its roar reaches the ant army, and they begin to charge at Jinwoo in a frenzy. The ant taunts Jinwoo, asking, "How's that, human?" while pointing toward him. Jinwoo, calm and unfazed, simply smiles, much to the ant's shock. He then calls upon his shadow army, and one by one, his shadows emerge, led by his generals. The chapter ends as his shadow army clashes with the ant army. The chapter begins with a fierce clash between the army of ants and the shadow army of Jinwoo. At this point, the situation appears to have reversed, as the ants, once bold in their assault, now seem to be cornered. Igris initiates the attack by releasing a sword slash, decapitating one of the ants. Meanwhile, one of the orc guards slices an ant's body in half, while another orc guard delivers a powerful punch that punctures another ant's body. Following this, Jinwoo commands, "Come forth," and a shadow emerges from behind him, Tusk. Before Tusk attacks, Jinwoo warns him to only target the ants, and if any humans are harmed, Tusk will not be summoned again. Tusk nods in agreement, signaling that he will follow the orders. He then activates the Hymn of Giants, and an energy fireball begins to form in his mouth. He directs it at the ants in front of him, and in an instant, a massive blast of fire engulfs numerous ants. The power of this skill is so intense that it even pierces through the tunnel, resembling a laser beam. Taegyu and Dongwook are shocked by the events unfolding before them. Taegyu wonders aloud if what they're seeing is a summoned beast, and if Jinwoo truly summoned it. Dongwook replies that it doesn't look like a beast, but more like a devil descending upon the land, watching as the ants burn under Tusk's flames. The ant beast watching the other ants being consumed by the fire, struggling to comprehend the situation. In its mind, it has always been the strongest, ever since its birth. Flashbacks of its past, slaying powerful foes like Kei, Ryuji, and Byung-gu, flood its thoughts. It had devoured anyone who dared to stand in its way and had claimed its place at the top of the food chain. In its mind, there was no limit to how powerful it could become. It believed itself to be the king. But now, as it watches Jinwoo emerge from the fire, it continuously questions, why? As Jinwoo approaches, his eyes glowing with an intense aura, the ant realizes it must flee to survive. A green aura surrounds the ant, and Jinwoo, recognizing the use of Byung-goo's healing ability, realizes he is facing a beast capable of absorbing the skills of its opponents through devouring them. In the following moments, the ant retreats, its only thought being to escape as far as possible. Jinwoo activates his commander's touch, and a massive aura in the shape of a hand materializes above the ant. With a swift motion, Jinwoo slams the hand down, crushing the ant to the ground. The impact is so powerful that the ant is squished. The ant, startled by the sudden attack, tries to crawl away using its claws, attempting to escape from Jinwoo. Jinwoo, however, declares that he will not let it escape. With a leap, Jinwoo lands above the ant, which is desperately trying to flee. Jinwoo activates the Mutilate skill, raining a flurry of slashes down on the ant. A notification appears on his system. The enemy has been defeated. Jinwoo levels up twice while gazing at the defeated ant. Just then, Yoon-ho calls out to Jinwoo, informing him that Haeun's condition is worsening. Jinwoo looks at Haeun, realizing that too much time has passed since the fight began. He knows he needs to find a healer. However, he cannot use his Shadow Exchange skill yet, as it is on cooldown, and he has never tried teleporting with another person before. His best option, Jinwoo thinks, is to fly out using Kaisel. But even then, he fears that Haeun might die during the flight. He wonders if there are any healers still alive in the Blade Guild. Jinwoo mutters to himself, there has to be a way, as he watches Haeun's fading condition. Suddenly, a thought strikes him. He turns to the cameraman and orders him to turn off the camera for a moment. The cameraman, confused, asks, "Pardon?" But Jinwoo repeats his order, threatening he will smash the camera into pieces if he doesn't comply. The cameraman, now nervous, agrees and turns off the camera. Jinwoo then instructs all his shadows to find Byung-goo's body. Yoon-ho, startled, asks, "Is he going to?" An orc guard soon finds Byung-goo's body and carries it back. Upon seeing the body, Jinwoo realizes that the ant had chewed through it. He wonders if what he is about to do will work. Yoon-ho, confused, asks Jinwoo what his plan is. At that moment, a notification pops up on Jinwoo's system. Shadow extraction can be used on Byung-goo's body. Jinwoo sighs in relief, realizing that this is the only way. Jinwoo speaks the word, "Arise," and black shadows envelop Byung-goo's body. However, a message pops up on his system, shadow extraction failed. Jinwoo, in disbelief, mutters, "No way." He tries again, speaking the word "arise," but once again, the system informs him that the extraction has failed. Jinwoo contemplates that his current skill should be sufficient for such a simple extraction. He theorizes that the reason it isn't working is because Byung-goo strongly opposes becoming a shadow soldier. Jinwoo believes that Byung-goo may think it immoral to turn a human into one. Iron, who stands nearby, watches the situation unfold in confusion. Jinwoo, however, is focused on saving the one life still remaining. His eyes turn to Haeun. On his final attempt, Jinwoo once again says, "Arise." This time, the shadows envelop Byung-goo's body successfully. Yoon-ho grabs Jinwoo's shoulder in shock and asks, "What did you do to Byung-goo?" His voice filled with disbelief, he adds, "Do you have the power to command the dead?" At last, Jinwoo's third attempt is successful. Byung-goo's hand emerges from the ground as the shadows solidify around him. The chapter ends with Byung-goo, now a shadow, standing tall beside Jinwoo. Chapter 105 begins within the tunnel, where Jinwoo has successfully extracted Byung-goo's body. Jong-in questions Jinwoo, wondering if he has the power to harness the dead. Dong-wook adds that Jinwoo is certainly not an ordinary summoner. Suddenly, Byung-goo's shadow begins to move and approaches Haeun, casting a healing spell on her. Yoon-ho, witnessing this, asks if Byung-goo is healing Haeun. Yoon-ho places a hand on Jinwoo's shoulder, prompting Jinwoo to explain that he can tell what kind of person Byung-goo is. He hasn't given any orders, yet Byung-goo has instinctively healed Haeun. Jinwoo believes Byung-goo has a warm heart, while Byung-goo's shadow is seen smiling. Yoon-ho closes his eyes and comments that the shadow is no longer truly Byung-goo. Jinwoo agrees with him. The cameraman, observing Jinwoo's summoning abilities, becomes speechless, realizing why Jinwoo ordered him to turn off the camera. The public can't know about this. Jong-in, watching the battle unfold, reflects on how Jinwoo's power continues to grow, finding it frightening. Yoon-ho then speaks to Jinwoo, suggesting that Jinwoo will likely take part in more battles from now on. While he acknowledges that Byung-goo's ability could be useful, he also requests that Jinwoo not use it in battle again, as Byung-goo dislikes violence. Upon hearing this, Jinwoo stops, removes Yoon-ho's hand from his shoulder, and tells him that this is the second time Yoon-ho has grabbed his shoulder, but this time it was different. Yoon-ho had made a heartfelt request. With a smile, Jinwoo agrees with Yoon-ho's words. He approaches Byung-goo's shadow and says, "Terminate extraction." Byung-goo's shadow, with a gentle expression, looks at him while Yoon-ho watches. Afterward, the shadow disappears, and Yoon-ho looks relieved. The other hunters also watch the moment, as though bidding farewell to Byung-goo. Yoon-ho thanks Jinwoo for his decision. The scene shifts outside the tunnel, where a helicopter arrives to pick up the hunters. As the S-rank hunters, along with the cameraman, emerge from the tunnel, Yoon-ho is seen carrying Byung-goo's body, while Dong-woo carries a recovering hand. As they approach the helicopter, Jinwoo tells Yoon-ho that he will stay behind for a while, as he has some unfinished business to take care of. Yoon-ho agrees, understanding that the raid is not yet over, especially with the large number of flying ants overhead. Jinwoo then tells Yoon-ho that he will clear the path and deal with the remaining ants. Jinwoo summons his shadow, Kaisel, and tells Yoon-ho, "See you later." Yoon-ho is shocked by the size of Jinwoo's shadow as they prepare to fly off, with Kaisel letting out a powerful roar as they ascend toward the ants. The scene changes to a ship carrying the remaining Japanese hunters, including Sugimoto. Hoshino is still in shock from the powerful ant that killed Ryuji and others. He refers to the ant as a monster and warns the others that they won't understand unless they witness the beast's power firsthand. He expresses doubt that they can win, declaring the raid a failure, as no hunter could possibly defeat the beast. Sugimoto tells him to stop worrying, revealing that the raid on Jeju Island is already over and the beast has been defeated. Hoshino is shocked, unable to believe it, but Sugimoto assures him that the information comes from the South Korean headquarters and is likely true. As Sugimoto looks out into the distance, he recalls his last conversation with Ryuji, who mentioned a skilled hunter named Sung-Jinwoo. Suddenly, a crew member announces that the ants are dispersing. Sugimoto responds, saying that there are still some left, and orders all units to prepare for battle, as multiple ships ready for the remaining ants' assault. Back inside the tunnel, Jinwoo's shadow army is clearing out the remaining ants, while his mages cast fireballs to destroy the ant eggs that haven't hatched yet. Jinwoo notices that he's gaining experience points from destroying the unhatched ants, and thinks to himself, "What a lucky bonus." As he checks his inventory, Jinwoo realizes he needs to organize his items one of these days. He notices an item he'd forgotten about, a massive sword, the Demon King's long sword, which he obtained after defeating Baron. This item has plus 350 attack stats and a second effect called Storm of White Flames, which summons a small lightning storm in a specific area. Jinwoo decides to give it a try. He swings the sword, creating lightning storms that strike the ant eggs. Impressed by its power, Jinwoo mutters to himself, "It'd be a waste to keep such a powerful item in my inventory." He resolves to use it to destroy the remaining eggs. The scene shifts to a house where two men are watching a live broadcast of the raid. One of the men, standing, asks the seated man, Mr. Brennan, what he thinks of Jinwoo. Mr. Brennan, who is introduced as the director of the Federal Bureau of Hunters, responds that he's been watching the videos and didn't realize how late it had gotten. He turns to the man standing, Michael Connor, and says, "You already know my answer. Isn't that why you came to my house at this ungodly hour?" Michael Connor explains that Jinwoo can summon hundreds of beasts and is truly one of a kind. He adds that it would be a shame to let such talent go to waste, as South Korea is too small for him. Mr. Brennan agrees and asks if Michael knows anything else about Jinwoo. Michael places a file on the table, revealing that it contains information about an explosion at the Bureau a few months ago, known as the Sung-Il-hwan incident. Michael explains that Sung-Il-hwan was captured alive inside an A-rank gate on the East Coast by an A-rank hunter named James. Initially unsure if he was human or a magic beast, Sung-Il-hwan claimed to be a hunter from South Korea. The Bureau's file on him still exists, But it turns out that Sung-Il-hwan is the father of Sung-Jinwoo. Michael suggests that now is the perfect opportunity, as Jinwoo's name has not yet reached the international stage. Mr. Brennan pauses and then responds, saying they can't do what they did with Hwang Dong-soo because South Korea has long been an ally of the United States, and taking another S-rank hunter away would be a slap in the face. Michael presses him, asking if Jinwoo isn't worth the risk. Mr. Brennan reflects on the footage of Jinwoo's strength and then asks Michael if he's sure he can handle it. Michael confidently responds that he will give it his best shot. The scene shifts back to the tunnel, where Jinwoo's system notifies him that he has leveled up. He reaches level 100 and reflects on how he's finally reached this milestone while holding the long sword. He decides to keep the sword, saying, "Finally." Jinwoo approaches the powerful ant beast's body and muses that this particular one seems unusually troublesome. He prepares to extract its shadow and says, "Arise." But suddenly, he wonders why everything has gone dark and he doesn't feel anything. He wonders if it's because he tried to extract the shadow or if the extraction failed. Then, a voice calls out from behind him, "And I'm back." Jinwoo turns around and sees the system notification confirming that the extraction was successful. The ant beast's shadow appears before him. For a moment, Jinwoo thought he had failed, but now he smiles as he faces the powerful beast. The shadow of the ant beast exudes a strong aura, and Jinwoo's system confirms that it is ranked general. The chapter ends with the shadow kneeling before Jinwoo. Before we wrap up this arc, if you enjoyed the video, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Thank you. The chapter begins with Jinwoo successfully extracting the shadow of the ant beast. Upon seeing it, he notices its rank and wonders about it, as he has never encountered a general rank before. So far, the ranks of his shadows have been standard, elite, knight, and elite knight, making Jinwoo think that the rank of general could be the next step above. This means that the shadow of the ant beast is the strongest soldier he has extracted so far. However, despite this realization, Jinwoo is not entirely surprised, given how powerful the ant beast was when it was alive. Afterward, Jinwoo decides that it is time to extract the shadow of the ant queen. However, before he proceeds, the shadow of the ant beast speaks, calling him "my king" and asking for a name. Jinwoo thinks to himself that this unconditional loyalty, which he has seen in his other shadow soldiers, is also present in this one. Jinwoo then asks how the ant beast is able to speak. The ant beast responds, saying, "I always could." Upon hearing this, Jinwoo suspects that the ant beast may have had the ability to speak before becoming a shadow soldier. He briefly questions if that's truly what the ant beast means, but his mind races back to his other soldiers. Iron, who was once human but could not speak after becoming a shadow, as well as Min Byung-gu and Tusk. The only difference, Jinwoo realizes, is their rank. Perhaps those of a higher rank, like the ant beast, could still retain their ability to speak. Jinwoo then tells the ant that he is the one who killed it and asks, "Do you still wish to follow my lead?" The ant beast answers, "I was not killed by you. Rather, it was through your powers that I was reborn, master." It continues by expressing that happiness overflows within it and that it will follow Jinwoo for all eternity. It repeats the words, "my king," while kneeling before him, and asks Jinwoo to bestow a name upon it. Jinwoo reflects for a moment, deciding that it would be strange to name it something like ant or bug. He realizes that the name should set it apart from the other ants. Suddenly, he remembers the name of an author from a written novel titled The Ants. He names the ant beast Beru. Beru thanks Jinwoo, and the system displays his name as it registers. After this, Jinwoo returns to the ant queen to extract her shadow. He speaks the word "arise," and the shadow of the ant queen is successfully extracted. However, as soon as this happens, the other ants who had become Jinwoo's soldiers after their death appear to be alerted, and Jinwoo notices that his bond with them has weakened. He then asks Beru to explain what is happening. Beru explains that the queen had an inherent power to rule over her colony, and as long as she was alive, she had the right to command the ants. Jinwoo, somewhat surprised, realizes that the queen was the leader of the colony, and her death is causing the ants to lose their cohesion. Jinwoo is also puzzled by the queen's low mana, given her rank. He asks Beru why her mana is so low, and Beru explains that the queen's mana was primarily used for reproduction. Now that she no longer has a body to reproduce with, her mana has diminished. Jinwoo concludes that the queen is not suited for battle and decides to terminate the extraction of her shadow, saying there is no need for two commanders. Jinwoo then addresses his soldiers, telling them there is no need to collect any more essence stones. The stones will instead be used to reconstruct the infrastructure of Jeju Island and compensate for the damages. He instructs his soldiers not to keep any for themselves, and they obey by discarding the crystals. Jinwoo reflects that the essence stone he acquired from Beru is more than enough. As he stares at the black stone, he realizes that the most pressing matter is how to handle the remaining ants. He wonders if he will be able to wipe them out using his current troop. Before Jinwoo can finish his thought, Beru speaks again and informs him that the enemies are struggling to navigate in the sky without a leader. They are unable to maintain their formation and are scattering in confusion. Upon hearing this, Jinwoo asks Beru how many ants remain. Beru responds that there were 8,700 ants before the attack today, and approximately 4,000 survived. Jinwoo thought he had wiped out the entire group in the earlier battle, but now he realizes that there are still many left. He asks Beru if he can wipe out the remaining ants on his own. Beru, radiating a powerful aura, responds, "If you give me an order, master." The scene shifts to the defense team, where the Knights Guild, led by Jong-soo and Yoon-ho, is stationed. Jong-soo spots the incoming ants and immediately warns his team to prepare for battle. Projectiles are launched from destroyers, and mages cast powerful energy blasts at the ants. The forces combine in a joint assault to take down the ants. The scene transitions to Gina, who announces that the ants are heading northward and are about to collide head-on with the Knights Guild. Ki-hoon, the leader of the Hunters Guild, orders his members to prepare for battle as the massive swarm of ants approaches. In the Fame Guild, the Vice Guild Master orders all hunters to prepare for battle, and one of her subordinates shouts, "Slaughter every ant in sight." Meanwhile, in the Fiend Guild, a hunter remarks that the ants are as strong as B-rank creatures. He orders his team to get into battle positions, warning them that straying from formation could result in death. He adds that they must reclaim the Fiend Guild's honor. However, one of their members, Min-sung, trembles in fear, unsure of how they will fight such powerful ants. Another guild member notices Min-sung's fear and thinks to himself that, despite Min-sung being A rank, he is a total wuss. The scene shifts once again to Joo-hee and Mr. Song, who are at the location where the ants have reached the shores of Houndy. Joo-hee wonders aloud if they are strong enough to fight the ants. Just then, a fast-moving beast appears and slashes through the ants approaching them, destroying them in a single strike. Joo-hee is shocked and asks Mr. Song what kind of beast that was. Mr. Song, equally stunned, replies, "What incredible speed. I can't make out what it is." The chapter ends with the revelation that the beast is Jinwoo's Shadow General Beru, leaving a trail of destruction behind it. The hunters are left bewildered, unsure of the identity of the beast. Chapter 107 begins with a map of South Korea, showing the locations of each guild. The efforts to exterminate the ants have lasted for 2 days in the southern region of South Korea. The ants have also been spotted in Chinese waters, with ships positioned along the coast of China. The captain, observing the situation, expresses disbelief that the ants have already reached China. He mentions that they haven't been able to sleep for 2 days. One of the crew members speaks up, noting that the second wave of ants is now within their shooting range. Another man behind him comments, "Orders to fire must be," but the captain interrupts, saying, "Hold on. It seems our hero wants to handle this on his own." We then see a man with 2 swords on his back, standing atop a swarm of ants. He says, "They just keep coming," before declaring that he will sink every last one of them to the depths of the ocean. With a powerful aura emanating from him, he unsheaths his swords and swings them. The slash creates a massive wave that sweeps through the ants. As the ants are struck, multiple explosions occur, obliterating them. The man scoffs, saying that the ants are weak, and if this was the same ant that battled Sung-Jinwoo, he would have had more fun. He then puts his swords away, lamenting, "What a shame," as the corpses of the ants fall into the sea. The scene transitions to the United States, where a woman is questioning a man sitting across from her about his opinion on Jinwoo. They are watching the battle unfold on a screen. The woman mentions that Mr. Huang and Sung-Jinwoo are connected by a past incident, and there is a possibility that Mr. Huang's older brother was murdered by Jinwoo, which has led Huang to seek revenge. The man, identified as Thomas Andre, the guild master of the Scavenger Guild, responds, asking, "Is that what their relationship boils down to?" He then adds that, given everything that has happened, it would be difficult to meet Jinwoo now, which is a shame because he was looking forward to meeting him in person. Thomas Andre, the leader of the Scavenger Guild, is a national-level hunter. His guild recruits a large number of S-rank hunters, and sometimes their members are dispatched to other countries to handle gates that the local guilds can't clear on their own. Huang Dongsu, a member of the Scavenger Guild, is also part of this group. The woman, Laura, asks Thomas what he would do if they got into a fight with Jinwoo. Thomas responds with a menacing tone, stating that Huang is property of the Scavenger Guild and the guild belongs to him. He warns that no one can mess with his property, not even the US government, as he crushes the remote in his hand. The scene shifts to Jeju Island, where the Knights Guild, led by their guild master Jong-su, is preparing for the third night of their raid. The soldiers and hunters of the guild are there to collect essence stones and stand by in case of another incident. As they enter a tunnel, Jong-su, while smoking a cigarette, begins to tell a story about a man who had no luck. Yoon-tae, confused, asks, "Sorry?" Jong-su explains that the man always tried to be the best at what he did, dreaming of becoming a gold medalist. He trained hard, followed a strict diet, passed the doping test, and even had a good dream the night before, adding that he was in top condition. However, during a manometer evaluation, it was revealed that he was an awakened being, which disqualified him from competing in the Olympics. Yoon-tae then says, "Oh, is this story about you?" as Jong-su cries. Jong-su reminisces, saying that it was the man's lifelong dream, but after he gave it up, he found a new calling and vowed to create the best guild in the country. Yoon-tae, impressed, tells Jong-su that he's an inspiration. Meanwhile, one of the female guild members warns him not to litter as Jong-su throws his cigarette on the ground. They continue walking through the tunnel when suddenly, they spot top-quality essence stones. Jong-su, excited by the discovery, says, "With these, creating the best guild in the country will be." But before he can finish his sentence, a female hunter warns them not to commit embezzlement, while Yoon-tae, unable to hide his excitement, drools at the sight of the stones. They continue walking, confident that the area is clear. Despite not sensing any mana, they relax, thinking they are safe. Just as they begin to feel at ease, an ant suddenly peeks out from a dark corner of the tunnel. Jong-su swiftly slices off its head, remarking, "Oops, one of them was hiding." He then reassures his comrades, saying there's no need to worry since there are only a few stragglers left, and they are there to protect. Suddenly, Yoon-tae calls out to Jong-su, but the latter doesn't turn to face him. The soldiers, noticing something, ask, "Who goes there?" A powerful figure clad in animal hide armor approaches them, radiating a formidable presence. Jong-su, recognizing that only soldiers and agents from the association should be on the island, asks the figure who he is. The hunters wonder if the figure is human, and the female hunter cautions them not to open fire, as he doesn't seem to be a magic beast. Jong-su warns the man that he is trespassing in a restricted area and that they will open fire if he doesn't leave. The man speaks in an unintelligible language while staring at them, revealing his sharp teeth and yellow eyes. Jong-su, bewildered, wonders if the language the man spoke was that of beasts. His face shows fear. Suddenly a finger snaps, and all the hunters and soldiers inside the tunnel lose consciousness. The beast-like man looks at one of his companions, who had snapped his fingers, and asks, "What do you think you're doing?" His companion, a man with white hair and blue skin, answers that there's no need to cause a commotion, as he merely put them to sleep for the time being. A conversation follows, with the white-haired figure asking his companion if he has checked their surroundings. He confirms, saying, "Yes, I'm positive it was his power." The white-haired man remarks on how odd it is that he's helping these humans. The beast-like man shrugs and says, "Who knows what's going on inside that head of his? If you're curious, why don't you go and ask him yourself?" He also comments that this place reeks of rotting ants. He adds, "Just imagine if that woman had witnessed this. She would have had a fit." The white-haired figure then says that their hunt will continue as scheduled and nothing will change. The other man agrees, as the white-haired man creates a blue gate similar to a dungeon gate. The beast-like man says he thinks one of them is here. The white-haired figure asks, "Here in South Korea?" The other replies, "How about we take care of them before we go?" But the white-haired figure simply replies, "Let's just leave the place in his hands." The beast-like man, sensing hesitation, asks, "Is that because you don't want to get involved?" The white-haired figure continues to step into the gate, saying, "I guess that's one way to interpret it. You can think whatever you want." As the gate disappears, the beast-like figure mutters, "Coward." The chapter ends with the beast-like man standing in front of Jong-soo, staring at him. He says, "Well, it seems there's no good reason to cause any more trouble," before slashing with his paws. Another gate, this time red, appears, and he steps through it, vanishing quickly. This marks the end of the Jeju Island arc. The next arc, the recruitment arc, is the 14th story arc of Solo Leveling, in which, during Min Byung-yu's funeral, Jinwoo meets Norma Selner, an upgrader who works for the American government.